welcome back to the third video in our Empire Storm series. I hope you had fun in the last video because honestly, the next two are downers. I might be looking a little red, a little puffy. I just spent the last hour sobbing. Hour is a little dramatic. I just spent the last little bit sobbing because I just finished Empire of Storms. I just finished, like, literally just finished the slides and we're immediately jumping into filming. But, oh my gosh, what a downer. This book ends on a downer. So I hope you had fun in the first half because this half is significantly less fun. Okay, great. Let's jump right into it. Why dilly-dally? Let's go ahead and deal with what we have to deal with here in Empire of Storms. Truly a bummer. So the second part is called Fireheart. And we open with our besties, Elide and Lorcan. They're at the circus doing circus things. Lorcan is doing his like, sword juggling performance. And Elide knows that pretty soon they are going to have to separate. Elide's going to have to go north and Lorcan is headed south. Lorcan's headed to Morinth, she's headed to Crescent. And she's kind of sad a little bit about it because she's kind of grown fond of Lorcan a bit. She's doing some light fortune telling in her tent. They've like had to occasionally do like some actual circuses now as they're going through small towns. Luckily Elide can like fake a psychic act pretty easily. There's only been a couple boys that have come in and been like, does the girl I like me? And it's like pretty easy to like pull one over on them. Meanwhile, Lorcan is like very actually good at sword juggling. Like, he's really not pretending. Obviously, that would be a much more difficult thing to pretend at. But he's like really good and he draws a crowd every night. He like wasn't a great performer. Like, he's got a stank face on all night long and not in like a cute way, but just like in a very uncharismatic sort of way. But his skills are so impressive that people are into it. Also, he's like so hot. Oh, mostly the farmers' wives are there because he takes his shirt off. And they oil his chest, okay? And the girlies are like, I would like to look at that. Someone actually comes up to Elide and is like, your husband could just be sitting up there fixing stockings and women would empty their pockets for a chance to stare at him. And Elide says, he had that effect wherever we went with our former carnival. Elide lied. Molly clicked her tongue. You're lucky, she murmured as Lorcan hurled his sword high in the air. The people gasped that he still looks at you the way he does. And Elide's confused. Because actually they're not really married. I don't know if you guys know this, but these guys don't know this. They're only fake married. And so it's like, she's like, what do you mean he looks at me the way he does? Suspicious, suspicious, suspicious. At night, Elide is back in her like fortune teller tent, telling fortunes. Lorcan comes into Elide's tent, and his shirt is different because he literally sold the shirt off of his back to some farmer's wife. Some farmer's wife was like, I'll buy your shirt. And he said, okay. And Lorcan comes in and he's like, I could have gone home with several different women tonight. And at least one guy. And Elide's like, okay, why are you here then? What's the deal? Why are you coming here bragging about that? She's in a bad mood. She's in like a little bit of a cranky mood tonight because she knows they're going to have to separate soon. And Lorcan is like, you're supposed to be my wife, so like, that would be rude. I'm not going to be that kind of fake husband, okay? I'm a very like loyal fake husband. Obviously. Elide's like, it doesn't matter, we're leaving soon anyway. And she's like very nervous about their separation. She's worried she's not going to be useful when she gets to Crescent. She's worried she's going to be in danger when she leaves Lorcan. Things are stressful for Miss Elide. And Lorcan is like, plenty of boys were checking you out. Why didn't you go out with one of them? Okay, if you wanted me to go out with one of the girlies hitting on me, why don't you go out with one of the boys hitting on you? And Elide's like, why? And Lorcan is like, did someone, a man, hurt you back in Morinth? He's like, actually, let's check in. Let's touch base. Why are we feeling this way? Why are we feeling so hostile? And Elide's like, no, because obviously she knows what he means. No, it never got that far. But the memory of those men touching her, laughing at her nakedness, she shoved it away. I've never been with a man. Never had the chance or the interest. And Lorcan's like, do you prefer women? Because if so, that's fine. That's fine. I just am asking. And Elide is like, no. At least I don't think so. She's like, honestly, never tried it, but like, not that interesting to me. I don't know what I prefer. Again, I've never had the opportunity to like feel that. Remember, she's been a prisoner, so you know, just like romance has not been top of her priority list. And Lorcan is like, why? And Elide wants to tell him about it, all of it. About why, if she were ever to feel desire, it'd be a result of trusting someone so much that those horrors faded away. A result of knowing they would fight tooth and claw to keep her free, and never lock her up, or hurt her, or leave her. And she's about to like confess all of this to Lorcan when all of a sudden screaming starts outside of the tent. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. Before we deal with the screaming, let's zip zap zop right into Lorcan's brain. Maybe it was the cosmetics, the heavy kohl around her eyes, the way the red painted lips made her mouth look like a fresh piece of fruit. But he'd noticed her. Noticed the way men had spotted her. Some had outright gawked, wonder and lust written across their bodies as Marion lingered, oblivious at the edge of the crowd, and watched Lorcan instead. Beautiful. After a few weeks of eating, of safety, the terrified, gaunt young woman had somehow gone from pretty to beautiful. Like a God's damned dog, he'd picked up her scent among the crowd and followed her back to this tent. In the shadows and glowing lights within, the headdress and the dangling beads and the dark robes, the oracle incarnate, serene, exquisite, and utterly forbidden. Remember, she's very, very young and he's very, very old. And Lorcan had been so busy just like looking at Elide and being like, I could like teach her a couple things about desire, that he didn't even notice the Ilken coming into camp. He was too distracted. He was too distracted by just like the mere thought of Elide. He goes outside. He literally like tucks Elide under a wagon. He says, you stay here. You hide away, okay? And 4 Ilken have descended on the camp. Then they're winged. They have wings now. They didn't have wings like in the forest. Now they have wings. And Lorcan knows they're hunting for Marion, aka Elide. And everyone's running around screaming. And his current plan is to use magic to distract the Ilken so Marion can scurry away. And the Ilken, the like head Ilken in charge, the HBIC, comes up to Lorcan and is like, hey, are you the guy in charge? You seem very tall and cranky, so it was worth a shot. And Lorcan, who has literally been waiting his whole life to be asked this question, he would literally love to be the guy in charge at all times, is like, yeah, I am the guy in charge, in fact. And the Ilken is like, we seek a girl. She murdered our kin and several others. She may be hiding here among your people. We've gotten, like, rumors that there might be a girlie here hiding amongst you. Lorcan's like, literally no, everyone who we've had with us has been with us for, like, a while, years. So it's probably not us. And he, like, looks around to see if, like, anyone's gonna disagree with them. Like, other people from the circus are gonna be like, actually, you guys are brand new. Because he's ready to chop their heads off. He's like, nobody disagree with me, okay? All of you out there, everyone listen up. I am in charge. And Ilken is like, she's very small. She's a teeny tiny baby, little cutie patootie, and she has an injured leg. She like limps. And Lorcan is like, everyone I know is very, very, very large and has 2 very, very good, perfect legs, no limping at all. So you're out of luck. No, none of that here. And the Ilken is like, okay, why don't we line everyone up from the circus so we can just check if everyone's good. We'll be on our merry way. And Lorcan's like, probably you can't because, like, everybody actually ran away when you got here because you were really scary, so I probably can't get everyone together. And Ilken is like, we will pay you. Her name is Elide Lorcan. Her uncle is a lord, so he's got lots of money. And Lorcan is like, Marion is a stinky, stinky liar. Her name is not even Marion, it's Elide. I can't believe her. But he's like, we literally don't even know anyone by that name, and I'm not even lying because I thought her name was Marianne. So... And the Ilken are like, pity. For if you had her in your company, we would have taken her and left. But now, the Ilken smiled at its 3 companions, and their dark wings rustled. Now it seems we have flown a very long way for nothing, and we are very hungry. And so Lorcan is chopping them up, and Elide is hiding in the floor of one of the wagons. And she feels really bad that she's brought the Ilken to this place. She can hear that, like, trauma is happening outside for a little bit. And she knows the monsters are here looking for her, and that, like, they might eat up some people. And she feels a little bad about that. But she knows she can't hide here forever. Like, eventually they will search the camp and find her. So as soon as the screaming, like, stops, she's like, okay, I'm going to come out. I'm going to run for the forest. I'm going to make a break for it. I'm going to get out of town. And she climbs out of the hole in the wagon floor. And who's sitting there but Lorcan? Lorcan's just, like, sitting in there, hands crossed over his lap, being like, hey, girlie, what you doing? What you up to? He's completely covered in black blood because he was just ripping up some Ilken, and he says, tell me, what would you have done if I was an Ilken soldier? And Elide doesn't respond because she probably, what she would have done is died, okay? And Lorcan goes, Elide, you are a little liar, aren't you? And Elide is like, okay, well, the thing is, why would I have trusted you? You stalked me through the forest. You're a big, scary man. You could have easily sold me to the highest bidder. Like, it makes the most sense for me not to give you my real name. Lorcan is like, she's got a little bit of a point there. And then Elide goes, did you kill all of them? And Lorcan is like, yeah, obviously. You think we'd be sitting here having a little chit-chat if I didn't kill all of them? And then Lorcan goes on, I am risking my neck for you, and yet you decide not to tell me that your uncle isn't just a mere commander at Morinth, but Erewhon's right hand, and you are his prized possession. Elide was like, I told you enough of the truth for you to, like, get what you needed. Who I am makes no difference, and I am no one's possession. She says, I'm not anyone's possession. I'm a girlie, and I belong to myself. And Lorcan is like, it does make a difference who you are. With your queen on the move, your uncle knows she'd pay a steep price to get you back. You are not a mere breeding asset. You are a negotiation tool. You might very well be what brings that woman to her knees. He doesn't call her a woman. He calls her the B word again. But like, honestly, Lorcan uses that word too much. I don't like it. I'm taking it away from him. And then Elide is like, you kept plenty of secrets too, Lorcan, and I still haven't been able to decide if I find it insulting or amusing that you think I'm too stupid to notice. That you thought I was some fear-addled girl, too grateful for the presence of such a strong, brooding warrior, to even question why you were there, or what you wanted, or what your stake in all this is. I gave you exactly what you wanted to see, a lost woman in need of help, perhaps a bit skilled at lying and deceit, but ultimately not worth more than a few seconds of consideration. You, in all of your immortal arrogance, didn't think twice. Why should you? When humans are so useless. Why should you even bother? When you planned to abandon me the moment you got what you needed. And Lorcan's like, careful what you say to me. And Elide's like, why? You gonna sell me back to Moranth? Use me as your ticket in? And Lorcan's like, okay, honestly, not a terrible idea. And Elide is like, don't even try. I will kill myself before I go back there. Like, I will not go back. Lorcan is like, why do they care about you so much? What is that? And also, what is that thing you're carrying? And Elide says it is a gift for Celaena Sarthotian from a woman kept imprisoned at Moranth, who had waited a long time to repay her for a past kindness. More than that, I don't know. And Lorcan says, a gift for an assassin, not the queen, perhaps nothing of note, but, and he says, let me see it. And Elide's like, no. And Lorcan knows he could overpower her. Remember, she's like literally this big. She's tiny. She's not literally this big. She's like 5 foot tall. She's a little nugget. And he is like 6'8". Okay, he's like a giant. He's like 2 feet taller than her probably. And he's also like a built fae warrior. He could like so easily just like take it from her. But he also knows that she has like a lot of trauma. And has been through a lot. And he thinks to himself that she's had a lot taken from her and he won't take another thing. She's been through enough at the hands of men. And then Elide decides to tell him the whole story, explains that Marion had been her mother's name, explains that her mother had died trying to keep Celaena Sarthotian, or trying to keep Aelin Galathinius safe, and everything that her uncle had made her endure over the years. And she continues, I have no lands, no money, no army to offer Aelin Galathinius, but I will find her, and I will help her, in whatever way I can, if only to keep just one girl, just one, from ever enduring what I did. And Lorcan's like, okay, since you're giving me a little truth, I will give you some truth too. I'm actually blood sworn to Queen Maeve, Queen of the Fae, although right now I'm doing something that she is probably not thrilled with. I'm sure she's not happy with me right now. And if anyone comes looking for me, it'll probably be bad news, so you probably should pretend you haven't seen me. Okay? Okay. Back on the ship with our Terracin crew, Manon, remember, we picked her up at the very end of part 1 because she fell in the ocean and was bleeding out. Manon wakes up on her boat, and her first thought when she realizes she's like on a boat and is alive is, where is Abraxas? Obviously, her baby, her BFF, her little angel boy. And Aelin's in the room with her, and she's like, good morning. Aelin turns to Manon again and says, looks like you owe me a life's debt again, Blackbeak. And then she continues, your fussy nursemaid of a wyvern is fine, by the way. I don't know how you wind up with a sweet thing like that for a mount, but he's content to sprawl in the sun on the foredeck. Can't say it makes the sailors particularly happy, especially cleaning up after him. But they're like, Abraxas, he's a little sweetheart. He's just laying upstairs because obviously he's a big boy. He can't fit downstairs with Manon. Otherwise, they probably would have let him in the room with her. But he's just like upstairs sunning himself. He's like on a little cruise and he's resting, relaxing, having a great time. And Aelin is like, that's a pretty bad injury. You must have made someone really mad. Like, you were like literally gutted. And Manon is like, yeah. I will just heal up super quick. I'm like almost better. And then we will get out of your hair. Thanks so much for the ride. See you later. And Aelin is like, sorry, no can do. You're a prisoner now. Not Abraxas, obviously. He's a sweet angel boy. He can do whatever he wants. But you are a prisoner. And if you cause any problems, we will kill you. XOXO. And Manon's like, okay, cool. But she's thinking to herself, like, I gotta get out of here. And then she realizes she doesn't really have anywhere else to go. Like, she's gotta get out of here to go to where? She doesn't know where the 13 are. She can't go back to Moranth. Obviously, her grandmother will kill her. She's like on the run from the witches. Like, this boat is as good a place to be as any. So then she goes back to sleep. Remember, she's like pretty badly injured, so she's still resting, recovering, and people are like kind of taking turns keeping an eye on her. And Dorian and Rowan go downstairs every day and heal her a little bit more and practice Dorian's like magic control. Like, Rowan uses this as like a teaching opportunity for Dorian. Because honestly, Rowan really doesn't care if Manon lives or dies. They're not buddies. Manon and Aelin have like a weird kind of like bond, rivalry relationship where they can recognize like the ferocity of the other one and like have some mutual respect there. Rowan doesn't have that same relationship with Manon. He's like, okay, Dorian, let's practice healing on her, because if you mess up, no big deal. But Dorian is excited to be down here because he uses the healing as an opportunity to look at her agonizingly beautiful face. Because remember, Dorian has a massive crush on Miss Manon, so he loves coming down and just staring at her. Update on where we are. So we're passing by Elway, but the boat is staying very far from the shore for safety. But as they're driving by, they can sometimes like catch a little bit of the coast in the very, very far distance. And Rowan knows that Aelin is thinking about Nehemia. How can she not think about Nehemia? And they should be at the Stone Marshes in about a week, thanks to Rowan's magic. He uses his wind magic to like propel their sails forward. So they're about halfway there. We don't know how many days into this. Manon wakes up while Dorian's on babysitting duty, and Dorian is like, hello, witchling. And Manon, of course, responds, hello, princeling. And Dorian gets her some water, and Manon is like, am I your prisoner? And Dorian's like, nope, you're not my prisoner. You're Aelin's prisoner. I just am also on this boat. And Dorian says, no, I owed you a life debt. So I saved your life, and now we're even Stevens. Like, I was the one who jumped in the water. He doesn't tell her this, but he was the one who, like, rescued her. He told them not to shoot, and then also rescued her from the ocean. And Manon's like, what the heck even happened? How did I end up here? And Dorian is like, we don't know. Your wyvern flew straight towards our ship and dumped you in the water. We got you on the boat. You were in bad shape, but Rowan fixed you right up. Then Dorian's like, do you want us, like, food? Do you eat food? What's the deal? And Manon's eyes flash to Dorian's neck, and Dorian's like, anyway. And then Manon's like, is Elide here? And Dorian's like, who is Elide? And Manon's like, okay, have you gotten any news of the 13? And Dorian's like, you are literally the only person we've seen, witch, wyvern, fae, in, like, weeks. Well, they've seen a lot of people in Skulls Bay. Since they've gotten the boat, they haven't seen anyone. And they didn't get news of the 13 when they were in Skulls Bay. And Manon says, okay, fine. Tell Aelin Galathinius not to bother using me for negotiations. The Blackbeak matron will not acknowledge me, either as heir or witch. All you will get out of it is revealing your precise location. So, like, do not use me as a negotiation tactic with Aelin. The witches literally hate me now, so just an FYI. And Dorian's like, what happened after Rifthold? He's like, assumes that this all was because of him. Manon says everything had a price. And then they like chat a little bit, and then Dorian lets her know that food is coming in a few minutes, and he says to her, I'd hate for you to waste away into nothing. It'd be a shame to lose the most beautiful woman in the world so soon into her immortal, wicked life. He's flirting so hard. This girl is bedridden, just was like on the death's door. And Dorian says, I'll bring her back with my real magic. But Dorian's like, don't even worry, you'll blend right in. Everyone on the ship is strangely attractive. It is like the attractive person convention. So like, beautiful people are not hard to come by here on the, I don't know. Does this ship have a name? I don't think we're told. And then Aedion drops off dinner, and Manon realizes that Dorian is definitely not in charge on the ship. Like, he's definitely the boss, not the boss, despite the fact that Dorian is the king of Rifthold. She asks Dorian about this, and Dorian says, you know my circumstances. I am now at the mercy of my friends. Like, I don't have a kingdom. They kicked me out, remember? You were there. You actually were part of the crew that kicked me out. No hard feelings, though. And Manon says, and the Queen of Terrasen is your friend? And Dorian says, there's no one else I'd want guarding my back, other than Chaol. But even thinking about him, missing him was useless. He's like, I do wish Chaol was here. And then he apologizes to Manon. He's like, sorry if you got really badly injured because of, like, you tried to save me. And Manon's like, meh, wasn't your fault, really. And she says, find out if my 13 are okay, and I will be at your service. Like, that's all I require of you. Find out if my 13 are okay. And she goes on to explain what happened to her, and she says, the cost of Rifthold was the life of my second. I refused to pay it, so I brought my 13 time to run. The moment I swung my sword at my grandmother, my title, my legion, was forfeit. I lost the 13 while I fled. I do not know if they are alive or if they have been hunted down. Find them for me. Learn if they live or if they have returned to the darkness. And Dorian's like, so the thing is, we are in the middle of the ocean, so it probably won't be any news for a while. So And Manon is like, they are all I have left. Like, as soon as you can find out news, please find out news. And Dorian is like, I will do what I can. And then he's about to walk out the door, and Manon stops him and says, and Elide. And Dorian's like, okay, you keep saying this, but I don't know who the heck that girl is. And Manon is like, just tell Aelin Galathinius that Elide Lorcan is alive and looking for her. Back to Elide. Let's see where Elide Lorcan is. Elide, Lorcan, and Lorcan are in a little town. 3 days have passed since the Ilken attack, and no one in their crew kind of realized the Ilken were looking for Elide, and they have continued on with the circus crew. And that night, Elide goes for a walk, and Lorcan follows her as the ever-dutiful husband. It's thundering outside. Lorcan says to Elide as they're leaving with the thunder booms, it's gonna rain. And Elide's like, I have indeed heard thunder before. So I do know that. I have heard thunder, okay? Do you know what that means? It means that everyone will be entrapped inside to do nothing but gossip. Like, I know it's gonna rain. That's why I went on a walk. Because we're gonna go to some taverns, and we're gonna do some eavesdropping, and we're gonna see if we can catch some news. And Lorcan is like, oh my gosh, you're so smart and so pretty, and I'm so in love with you. And they go to a tavern, they find a table, and Elide orders them lunch. Drink, Elide commanded him. Lorcan debated telling her not to give him orders, but he liked seeing this small, fine-boned creature in action. Liked seeing her size up a room full of strangers and select her prey. So Lorcan drank and watched her while she watched the others. So many calculating thoughts beneath that pale face. So many lies ready to spill from those rosebud lips. Part of him wondered if his own queen could find her useful. If Maeve would also pick up on the fact that it was perhaps Aneth herself who taught the girl to look and listen and lie. Part of him dreaded the thought of the lead in Maeve's hands. What she'd become. What Maeve would ask her to do as spy or courtier. Courtier? Perhaps it was good that Elide was mortal. Lifespan too short for Maeve to bother honing her into quite possibly her most vicious sentinel. Guys, this is where I have to confess that my favorite romance in this whole book series is Elide and Lorcan. I just like simply adore them. I think it's really sweet. Okay? Sue me. Lorcan is too busy just admiring Elide to like really pay attention to what's happening around them. So he's really surprised when Elide goes over to the table next to them and is like, hey, what do you mean Rifthold's gone? And the guy at the table behind them is like, oh yeah, it was taken over by the witches, and kind of explains the situation with Dorian. And Elide's essentially just like interviewing them and finds out that Aelin was just down in Skulls Bay. That Aelin was not in Terrasen, but was in Skulls Bay. And Elide goes to 2 more taverns, repeating the same pattern, just gathering information and learning what is happening. And also that much of it is happening down south, even though she was anticipating Aelin and all of the crew were to be up north. And so was Lorcan to some extent. And they go outside and they like talk to each other for the first time that night. And Elide says to Lorcan, I was supposed to go north. Where do I head now? How do I find her? And Lorcan is like, what did you glean from the rumors? He'd been analyzing each tidbit of information, but wanted to see that clever mind at work. And some small part of him wanted to see what she'd decide about their splitting ways too. And Elide is like, I think she's going to Elway. How far is that? And Lorcan is like, far. I can get you a map to like help you find your way. And Elide is like, it would be no use. Lorcan is like, maps are literally always useful. And Elide's like, not if you can't read. And Lorcan is literally so shocked because Elide is the most smartest, most brilliant girl he's ever met in his whole entire life. Like, what do you mean she can't read? And she explains how she was never taught. SarahJMaas always out here representing the illiterate girls. And also representing them in a way that is, I think, important and something we should talk about in the current moment. Because illiteracy is actually a rising problem in the United States as well, in the current moment. And it is almost always a result of circumstance, not a result of intelligence. Even though, like, people will not get help because they're like, if you're like an adult who can't read, that like feels very embarrassing. Gotta use this moment to speak out against illiteracy. Because this is a problem we can tackle. Elide would want us to tackle it, to be honest. Or Lorcan starts to smell a guard coming towards them. And it's very clear that the people of the circus have finally sold them out. And Lorcan is like, okay, so we have someone is coming. We have 2 things we could do. 1, I kill literally everyone, and then we go back to the circus, see if they sold us out. And if they did, we kill them too. Or 2, we can get on one of these boats right now and leave. And Elide is like, I pick the boats. And Lorcan is like, cool. And so they're like running, but Elide is too slow. And so Lorcan has to scoop her up and carry her. But he asks permission first. Obviously, he's not rude. He always asks before he picks her up. That's not also true. He does start to pick her up later. They spend a lot more time. They get closer, and he starts to pick her up without asking. But in these first incidences, he does ask before he like chucks her over his shoulder and runs through the city just like holding her. They jump onto a boat, and the guy is like, hey, that's my boat. And Lorcan says, nope, now it's not my boat. And the guy is like, you will not clear the city walls without like me there to be like, hi, we're cool. And Lorcan's like, okay, get in now. And Elide is like, the guy's like very wary. And Elide's like, that big guy is gonna kill you if you don't get in right now. Like, he's big and he's strong and he has magic powers. He will kill you before you can get away from here. Get in and we will let you out as soon as we're outside of the city walls. Like, no big deal. And the guy's like, I do not trust you. You guys are just gonna make me get you out of the city walls, and then the big guy is gonna kill me anyway. And Elide is like, I will tell him not to. I'm kind of the boss of him. Don't even worry, just like hop on it. And the guy's like, seems reasonable, and he does hop on. And then Lorcan says to him, if you betray us, you'll be dead before the guards can even board. Okay? So as we're going through the city walls, and you have to be like, all clear. Don't betray us, because I will kill you. Okay, great. And so they get inside, and again, picks up Elide, and he chucks her under a table, and her and Lorcan hide for a bit in this, like, cabin at the bottom of the ship. But once the, like, conversation at the city wall ends, Lorcan's like, I'm gonna go upstairs to just, like, make sure everything's all good, and then we can carry on our merry way. And Elide hears a splash, and then Lorcan comes back down the stairs, and he's like, you guys, you can come out now. The guy swam to shore, so we're good to go. And Elide is like, oh, that's kind of worrying. He's like, that was like very quick. Like, he might run to town and tell them. Like, it's not going to take very long for them to catch up. Like, we need to like really get a move on. And Lorcan is like, we'll deal with it. But then he's acting very suspicious. He's like, we'll deal with it if it happens. No worries. And Elide realizes Lorcan's sleeves are all wet. Like, he just washed his hands in the river after murdering someone. And didn't roll up his sleeves. And Elide's like, you killed him. And Lorcan is like, sometimes you need to do what you must in order to survive. And Elide is mad. She promised the man he would be fine, and now he's dead. And she feels like she betrayed that man a little bit. And the word key in Elide's pocket starts picking up on the vibe and starts humming. Because remember, when she gets upset, it starts to, like, magic a little. I don't know. And Lorcan is like, again, what is that? And Elide refuses to answer, and Lorcan flings open the door and he leaves the room because he's caught onto something. He grabs the Amulet of Orient and he starts like ripping it open. He starts like beating it to shreds, beating it and ripping it open. Elide comes upstairs to be like, what the heck is going on? And Lorcan asks her again, what is it that you carry? And Elide is like, why don't you slit my throat and find out? Lorcan continues. If you have a problem with me killing someone who reeked of itching to betray us the moment he got the chance, then you are gonna love your queen. And Elide is like, what do you mean? And Lorcan says, Celaena Sarthothian is a 19-year-old assassin who calls herself the best in the world. And he goes on to tell Elide the entire story of Aelin and Celaena and how they are the same person. Celaena started going by her true name again, a brutal smile. Aelin Galathinius. Your fire-breathing queen, she's a god's-damned assassin. Trained to be a killer from the moment your mother died. Defending her. Trained to be no better than the man who butchered your mother and your royal family. While you were locked in that tower 10 years ago, she was indulging in the riches of Rifthold. Spoiled and coddled by her master, the king of the assassins. I don't know how to call that being coddled, but okay. Whom she murdered in cold blood this spring. So you'll find that your long-lost savior is little better than I am. You'll find that she would have killed the man same as I did and would have had as little tolerance for your whining as I do. Which, like, honestly, I do kind of feel like that might be true. She might not have killed that man, but she probably wouldn't really tolerate the whining. And then Elide says, I was wrong. I said you and I were the same, that we had no family, no friends, but I have none because land and circumstance separate me from them. You have none because no one can stomach being around you. And you know what is that biggest lie you tell everyone, Lorcan? Is that you prefer it that way. What I hear when you rant about my queen, all I hear are the words of someone who is deeply, deeply jealous and lonely and pathetic. All I hear are the words of someone who saw Aelin and Prince Rowan fall in love and resented them for their happiness because you are so unhappy. So call Aelin a murderer and a thief and a liar. Call her a bitch queen and a fire breather. But forgive me if I take it upon myself to be the judge of those things when I meet her, which I will do. I'm going to Elway. Take me ashore and I will wash my hands of you as easily as you wash the blood of that man off of yours. Okay, I have like so many thoughts about Elide, and we will like talk more about Elide, especially in Kingdom of Ash. But I think Elide is such a powerful character and such an important character thematically because she is this girl who does not have magic, who has been in like maybe even worse circumstances than Aelin in many ways, or at least comparable circumstances, right? Like these imprisoned circumstances where she was unable to like do anything, and she has continued to choose hope again and again and again. But she hasn't needed these like massive divine interventions for her to continue hoping. Like even in the face of despair, Elide has done nothing but to continue to hope. she might not have magic powers, but like Elide is one of the most powerful characters in this book. She is like tiny and she doesn't have magic, and she is just like so incredibly fierce and stands up against Lorcan, who is this like pillar of kind of the opposite. This man who has been given a lot, right? Like he's been, you know, bad circumstances. Maeve is a bad lady, okay? He's been stuck with this bad lady, but he is like very big, very strong, very powerful. And he is unable to choose hope in any circumstance. Or Lorcan is like, no. And Elide's like, did you not hear what I said? Take me to shore. And Lorcan is like, no. And Elide is like, no. And Lorcan says, the river veered southward 2 miles ago. From the map in the cabin, we take it straight south, then find the fastest route to Benjali. Turns out, now I have business with Aelin Galathynius too. Congratulations, lady. You just got yourself a guide to Elway. Also, you're still my fake wife, and you can't stop me from being your fake husband. We are fake married still. I know we're on the boat in the middle of the ocean and no one's around, but we are still fake married. And Elide slams the door, runs downstairs. She's like pissed. She doesn't want to talk to this stupid man anymore. And he is in his head planning a way to kill Aelin, because when he opened up the amulet of Orinth, there was a little note from Miss Aelin Galathynius. There had been nothing inside that amulet but one of those rings, an utterly useless wordstone ring wrapped in a bit of parchment, and on it was written in a feminine scrawl, "Here's hoping you discover more creative terms than bitch to call me when you find this. With all my love, AAG." And Elide. What Elide carried had made him realize. He'd think about that later, contemplate what to do with the Lady of Perianth later. His only consolation was that he'd stolen back Mala's ring. But Aelin still had the key, and if Elide needed to go to Aelin anyway, he'd find Aelin for Elide. He'd make the Queen of Terrasen crawl before the end of it. The world began and ended in fire. Aelin is having a little bitty nightmare, and she's literally on fire in her bed. Rowan's trying to wake her up. She is lighting the whole room on fire. He's like, hey, bestie, it's probably not the best course of action to literally burn up the ship that we are currently staying on. He's trying to talk her down, and she literally is on fire so strong that she starts to drown in her own flame. And he grabs her face, which is also on fire, mind you, and he says to her, "You are its master. You control it. Your fear grants it the right to take you over. I see you. I see every part of you, and I am not afraid." And she thinks to herself, I will not be afraid. That little line from Sam that does make me go, oh, every time. And a line in the burning brightness. My name is Aelin Ashriver Galathynius, and I will not be afraid. This is not gonna cry out because tears didn't leave my eyeballs. We have a lot of tears coming in this book. This isn't one of them. And she's able to come back to herself. But Rowan is obviously very freaked out. And he's kind of has gone into feral Rowan mode. He's gone into totally animalistic fae mode, and now Aelin's trying to calm him down. And she turns to Rowan and she says, if you don't calm down right now and start acting like a prince, you can sleep on the floor. Once he's finally come back to himself, Aelin was like, what the heck was that? Why did you go all feral on me? And Rowan was like, that was me losing control. And Aelin was like, why? Rowan is usually so controlled, and they have been in so many situations in which Aelin was in more substantial danger, but Aelin is confused why he wasn't able to hold on to himself now. And Rowan says, I didn't know if she'd taken you again. Even when I realized you were just in magic's thrall, the magic took you away. It's been a long time since I wasn't certain, since I didn't know how to get you back. Before you called me a territorial fae bastard, allow me to apologize and explain that it's very difficult. And Aelin is like, it's okay. You are not a human, and I don't need you to be. You are who you are, and you don't need to apologize for that. Okay, I just wanted to understand what was happening. I don't need you to apologize for something that is innate to your nature. And they chat about marriage and the idea of Aelin marrying for an alliance, and how she's no, I don't want that or need that. I don't need a husband in this moment who would try to slow me down. I need an ally who will not cramp my style. And she's like, I need you. I need you to be a part of my court that can change the world. If we survive this world, she murmured after a while onto his bare chest, you and I are going to have to learn how to relax. To sleep through the night. If we survive this war, princess, he said, running a finger down the groove of her spine, I'll be happy to do anything you want. Even learn how to relax. And if we never have a moment's peace, even if after we get the lock, the keys, and send Erewhon back to his hellhole realm. The amulet faded, replaced by something more intent as his fingers stilled on her back. Even if we have threats of war every other day, even if we have to host fussy emissaries, even if we have to visit that god's awful kingdoms and play nice, I'll be happy to do it if you're at my side. Her lips trembled. Ooch, you. Since when did you learn to make such pretty speeches? I just needed the right excuse to learn, he said. In Manon's room, Manon wakes up. The vibes are weird in the ship, probably because Aelin is on fire in the other room, to be honest. Like, I bet the magic, she was like, weird vibes. And she tests the shackles. She shackles to the bed. I don't think I mentioned that earlier. And it makes her think of Elide and how Elide spent so much of her life shackled. And she is like, as soon as I get out of here, I gotta look for Girly. I can't believe we just left her in the forest. I, like, really thought she would have found Aelin by now. And then Dorian strolls in, just like Manon had summoned him. And Dorian is like, did you send that ripple of power through the whole ship? And Manon was like, no, witches don't have that sort of power. And Dorian's like, but you guys are immortal. Do you have other kinds of power? And Manon explains the yielding. She nodded, and he took that as an invitation to slide into his usual chair. It's called the yielding, she said, a chill brushing down her spine. The bit of magic we have. We usually cannot summon or wield, but for one moment in a witch's life, she can summon great power to unleash upon her enemies. The cost is that she is incinerated in the blast. Her body yielded to the darkness. In the witch wars, witches on both sides made yieldings during every battle and skirmish. It's suicide, to blow yourself to smithereens and take enemies with you. It is, and it's not pretty. As the Iron-Teeth Witch yields its life to darkness, its power fills her and unleashes from her in an ebony wave, a manifestation of what lies in our souls. Dorian's like, are the witches going to use that on us when we get into battle with them? And Manon is like, yeah, if you're facing witches in battle, it's like very possible. Usually it's the younger witches that do the yielding who are not quite as skilled in battle. If they feel like really cornered, they will sometimes use the wielding. Older witches are usually too like skilled and also like too proud to give up their lives in that way. And Dorian's like, oh my gosh, that's like murder. And Manon is like, it's war. War is literally sanctioned murder, no matter what side you are on. Ire flickered on his face as she asked, have you ever killed a man? And Dorian doesn't answer, but Manon knows that the Valk demon inside of him did. And she says to him, remember what they made you do, Manon said, when you face them again. Like, channel that anger, channel that rage that you're feeling right now. And Dorian is like, I won't need to remember. I doubt I will ever forget it, witchling. He stood and headed for the door. And Manon's like, hey, is there any way you could take these shackles off? They're, like, very annoying. I promise, like, not to harm anyone on the ship. And Dorian is like, it is not my call. You'll have to ask Aelin. She's the boss around here. And then there's some light flirting. And then Manon says to him, if I would have been asleep, would you have lingered to stare at me a while? And Dorian says, would you have objected? And then Manon flirts some more and essentially offers to sleep with Dorian. And he's like, no. And she's offended because no one has ever denied her. But then Dorian comes back and explicitly asks for Manon's consent, and he's like, I need a verbal yes that you are okay with this, girly. I still think the power dynamic is off. I still will allow it in this circumstance, but I still think even if you ask permission of your actual prisoner, the power dynamic does make consent a little invalid. But that's okay. Sometimes we're willing to give fiction some grace. And Dorian starts to take Manon's shirt off with his shadow hands, and then he kisses her a bunch, then he leaves. And Manon is like, what the heck? That was so rude. The next morning, Manon is cranky because of Dorian and her's half-finished activity. And Aelin brings her breakfast, but he can still smell Dorian in the room. He can tell that they were heavily making out. And he's like, what the heck is Dorian getting up to? And he goes upstairs and he mentions it to Lysandra later because he thinks it's weird. He's like, how did Dorian go from Sorsha, the nice healer girl, to Manon, a literal evil witch? And Lysandra's like, people sometimes crave the opposite of what they've lost. I would stay out of it. I would say that's not my business. And Aiden's like, I'm not getting in the middle of that disaster, don't worry. Though I wouldn't let those iron teeth near my favorite part if I were him. Aiden grinned as Lysandra tipped her head back and laughed. He added, besides, watching Aelin and the witch go head-to-head this morning about Elide was enough to remind me to stay the hell back and appreciate the spectacle. Apparently, we don't get to see this on page, which is a little bit upsetting to me. Manon told Aelin everything. She was like, here's the deal with Elide, here's how I know her, here's where I left her, here's everything that's happening with her. And everything that happened with her, with Vernon before I knew her. And how she's now just like wandering out in Oakwald by herself. Slapped Manon in the face for leaving Elide out there alone, and then a ring of fire around Manon's throat. And then, cast a ring of fire around Manon's throat, slamming her into the wood. And Aelin made her swear that everything she said was truthful. And Rowan was like, Manon may have caused some issues, but she also is the reason that Elide is alive. She's the reason Elide was able to escape from that place, so. And Aelin had merely said if Manon hadn't been, the fire would have already been down her throat. Aelin was like, good thing she helped Elide, because otherwise they literally would have already killed her. She would already be killed dead. And then Aelin and Lysandra briefly talk about how Aelin has been, avoiding Gabriel on the ship. The vibes are still weird. They haven't really been able to, chat in any real way. And then we have Abraxas. He's just vibing on the deck. He's such a nice boy. They don't even chain him up. He like leaves sometimes to go like catch some fish to eat as a snack because he has to do all his own hunting and catch his own food. But he always comes back and just like hangs out with him on the boat. And this is just like a regular day on the boat. Light activities. Rowan and Aelin are sparring on the deck. Lysandra is watching, and Aedian's like, you have been doing so good with training, because apparently everyone has been teaching Lysandra how to handle various weapons and like train her. So when she's in her human form, if she's ever in her human form, she can like use her weapons to battle a little bit. Even though most of the time she will probably be in battle in an animal form. And then Dorian pops from upstairs and he says, hi guys, I think if we let Manon out of her shackles, she'd be so nice to us and she wouldn't hurt anybody. She's so nice. And Aelin is like, you're only saying that because you've been kissing her. Which is like not super appropriate. This is not how we behave with our prisoners, by the way, Dorian. And Dorian is like, you kiss Rowan. And Aelin is like, okay. Manon is designed to ensnare men. She's a witch, Dorian. No, I'm not going to endanger everyone on the ship because you have a crush on her. And Dorian's like, I'm a king, you know. Like, I know you're the queen of the ship, but like, I'm a king. Aelin is like annoyed, but decides to give him a little wiggle room to maintain their alliance and their friendship. She can like feel the like tension pulling a little bit between the two of them, and she thinks it's important to like maintain that relationship. And so she says, fine, like this isn't a battle worth fighting. Chains are off only in her room, and there's always a guard outside of her door, and the chains go back on her if she leaves her room at all. Okay, deal? And Aelin is like, you know, last time we encountered her and her coven tried to kill me. And Dorian is like, it was probably your fault. Like, were you mean to her first? Because honestly, she saved me twice. So I actually think she's like pretty nice, and you might have been the aggressor in that situation. And Aelin is like, I'm sure she had her own reasons to save you. I highly doubt it's because in her 100 years of killing, she decided your pretty face would turn her good. You know, like, Dorian says, yours turned Rowan from 300 centuries of a blood oath. So like, pretty faces can do a lot of good in this world, Aelin. And I don't think you should really like neglect that. And then this hurts Rowan's feeling. I don't know. He gets like riled up when people are mean to Aelin. And Dorian is like, sorry, Rowan, you know we're boys. I did not mean anything bad by it. We are bros, we are boys. Remember 2 boys in a boat? That was a fun time. And Aelin is like, okay, let's go get your witchy bestie and let's take her on a little walk. Okay? And so literally everyone comes downstairs to do this. Why does the whole crew come downstairs to do this? IDK. Everyone goes to get Manon from her room. Aelin's still kind of annoyed. And she said, I wish Chaol was here. Chaol would have a literal heart attack if he could see Dorian having a crush, trying to, like, date the literal iron teeth wing leader witch we have aboard our ship. Chaol would lose his ever-loving mind. He would be dead. Dead as a doornail, right there on the ground. Good thing he's not here, actually. And they get downstairs, and Manon immediately is like, who the heck is that? Pointing at Fenris. She's like, I don't know that man. Who is that? Who's that? And Dorian's like, you've met him before. He's Fenris, sworn warrior of Queen Maeve. And Manon is like, no, he's not. And she lunges straight for his throat. And Rowan uses his magic to pull them apart. He trusts Manon to some extent because he like sucks both of their air out and they're both like choking on the floor. And Aelin is like, turns to Manon and is like, what do you mean that's not Fenris? And then Rowan's magic like wears off. Fenris melts away. And the Bloodhound is here. And Aelin is like, what the heck are you? And the Bloodhound says, Erewhon's Bloodhound. And then she turns to Manon. So your guts stayed in. And Aelin is like, where's Fenris? And the Bloodhound is like, on a patrol of the ship on another level, I assume. Unaware that, just as you were unaware, that one of your own wasn't truly with you. Well, and Aelin was like, ugh, another talker. Aelin said, flipping her braid over her shoulder. Let me guess, you killed a sailor, took his place, learned what you needed to know about how to get Manon off the ship and our patrols, and what? You planned to carry her off into the night? Honestly, you could have just snuck in here and saved yourself 1,000 stupid steps. Aelin was like, this was not the most efficient way to do this. Then the Bloodhound starts hissing at Lysandra and calling her a shifter, which she is, and continues on. I was looking for Manon, but this is so much better. Her eyes roll back in her head and she starts screaming. I just called Erewhon and they know where you all are. You should have just given me Manon and I would have left. And they start shooting arrows. I don't know how they're shooting arrows in this tiny room. I'm like a little confused by that. Maybe they left the room. IDK. But they start shooting arrows and stabbing her, and she throws a leather braided bracelet on the ground at Manon and says, your second screamed when Erewhon broke her, the Bloodhound said. His dark majesty sends this to remember her by, a gift from the king of the Valg to the last living Crochan queen. Manon stared and stared at the bracelet. the one Astrid had worn every day, even when battle did not demand it, and did not care what the Bloodhound had declared to the others, did not care that she was heir to the Blackbeak witch clan, or queen of the Crescents, did not care if Manon did not even finish the thought as the roar silenced everything in her head, the roar that came out of her mouth as she launched herself at the Bloodhound. She's ripping at the Bloodhound, and the Bloodhound is talking about Astrid's brand and her stillborn. Like, the Bloodhound is still talking. But then Dorian's shadow hands snap the Bloodhound's neck. And Manon is so mad. She turns to Dorian and she, like, snarls at him. How dare you still steal my kill? Which, like, honestly, yeah. Manon had it under control, Dorian. That was really rude. And Abraxas is roaring up on the deck, and Manon sprints out of the room to go check on Braxy. On the top of the ship, the Ilken are here. Abraxas and Lysandra, well, Abraxas is always in wyvern form, but Lysandra shifts into wyvern form that she is based off of Abraxas, and they're fighting the flying Ilken, and Aelin's fighting them with both her flames and swords. Aedian's up on the deck too, fighting them. Fenris is there, ripping out throats. And they go to corner Aelin, and Fenris jumps and rips out one's throat, and then another one, like, gets it, and Fenris is now bleeding. And one of the Ilken pass along a message. I was sent to deliver a message. Okay. Thank you for confirming in Skull's Bay that you carry what his dark majesty seeks. And they're able to defeat the Ilken. It's clear that they were mainly sent as just messengers. It, like, wasn't a large enough fleet to, like, constitute, like, a real battle. And Rowan turns into his hawk form and he checks on the other boats. No Ilken over there. He's, like, very quick to check in on them, and he comes back. Aelin's fine. Fenris is bleeding, and Aelin is, like, trying to patch him up, and there's one Ilken left, and Rowan's gonna rip its head off, but the thing, like, takes off and says, Morinth looks forward to welcoming you, and it starts flying away. And Rowan is like, is anyone gonna get that last Ilken? Rowan is gonna hit it with his bow and arrow. And Aelin is trying to distract Fenris while she heals them, and she starts asking about his magic, because he can, like, sort of teleport. If you've read A Court of Thorns and Roses, that series, they do something called winnowing, where they, like, can, like, do this, like, short distance teleporting, and that's what Fenris can do. He can, like, just, like, zap from spot to spot. And he explains, it lets me slip between the folds in the world, only short distances and only a few times before I'm drained, but it's useful on a killing field. And he learns that Fenris and his brother Connell were sons of nobles, and, like, kind of explains their journey to, like, getting tangled up with Maeve. And Aelin then starts talking to Gabriel and asks if he likes being bound to Maeve, mostly, and Gabriel's like, yeah, it's mostly fine. Fae men like having something to serve, or someone to serve. He's like, I've liked it most of the time except this one time. And it's just, like, a little awkward on the ship because he's obviously referencing Aedian's mom. Manon is on the deck patching up Abraxas. Her room is in shreds after the whole incident with the Bloodhound. And Abraxas is, like, mostly fine. He lost some blood, but he didn't get any poison from the Ilken in him, and he's okay. But she wouldn't let anyone else near him because, like, obviously Rowan and Aelin could have healed him, like, pretty instantaneously. But Manon was like, don't get close to him, and she, like, snarled at Aelin. And afterwards, Aelin had cursed enough to make everyone else halt, saying she'd ready dessert if the beast died, and Manon had threatened to rip out her spine. Aelin had given her a vulgar gesture, and Lysandra had been forced to monitor the space between them for an hour, perched on the rigging of the sail mast in a ghost leopard form, tail swaying in the breeze, because the girlies were gonna fight each other. And Dorian is like, okay, this is perfect flirting time, because she's alone on the deck with Abraxas. And Manon turns to him and says, do I have you to thank for this freedom, that I'm, like, allowed to be out here alone? And Dorian's like, maybe. And they chat about his shadow hands, and Manon reminds him that he's not a monster, even though he's killed the Bloodhound. Like, honestly, it was, like, a mercy that he offered the Bloodhound a clean death. Then Dorian asks her, what were those things, the Ilken? And Manon says, I assume they were part of whatever is in those mountains. And at that, like, Aelin pops up from wherever she was, and she was like, what do you mean, whatever is in those mountains? And then Aedian, Fenris, Gabriel pop up, like, a moment later. Everyone has been, like, waiting for Manon to start talking. And Manon continues, I never saw the Ilken, just heard about them. And Aelin is like, are they scouts or are they warriors? And Manon's like, I don't know. All I know is that my shadows could not hunt or track these things. And Aelin starts staring out of frustration out at the open water. And Manon goes, snap out of it. So you miscalculated. They tracked you. Don't get distracted with the minor defeats. This is a war. Cities will be lost. People slaughtered. And if I were you, I would be more concerned about why they sent so few of the Ilken. And Aelin is like, I don't care what you think, Blackbeak. And Manon says, I am not a Blackbeak. And Aelin says, okay, let's hear that story then. And Manon tells the story of her father and her mother and explains how she is heir to actually the Crocian crown and to the Blackbeak line, whether her grandmother likes it or not. 2 queens. There were 2 queens among them, Dorian realized. So, Dorian, obviously, king of Rifthold, or king of Ardling. Manon, queen of the witches, both of the witches. She's by rights. Aelin, queen of Tirsen. Queenie is everywhere. And Aelin says, I knew there was a reason I saved you. And Fenris is like, the thing I don't understand is why Erewhon has waited so long to kill you. Why did he let you get powerful first?" talking to Aelin. And Aelin was like, "He thought I was dead for like a long time." And Fenris is like, "Maeve knew you were alive. Odds are Erewhon did too." And Adian is like, "Maybe she told Erewhon, like maybe Maeve told Erewhon." Fenris is like, no. She's always been very annoyed with Ardaline. She like really doesn't want to have anything to do with Erewhon and Ardaline. And Adian's like, "Yeah, but everyone can be bought for a price." And Fenris says, "Nameless is the price of Maeve's allegiance. It cannot be purchased." And Aelin repeats the phrase, "Nameless is my price." And she turns to Manon. "Can your kind see the future? Can it see it as an oracle can?" And Manon says, "Sometimes the blue bloods claim they can." "What about Baba Yellowlegs?" Manon says, "Yellowlegs was a fortune teller, a powerful oracle. I bet she knew who the queen was the moment she saw her. And she saw things she planned to sell to the highest bidder. Yellowlegs wouldn't have told the queen anything outright, only in veiled terms, so it'd drive the girl mad when she figured it out." And then Aelin leaves, and she goes down to her bathroom, essentially her private bathing chambers, and immediately starts like throwing up. And Rowan comes to the door and like knocks on it and is like, "Hey, can I come in and like take care of you? You clearly are not well." And Aelin is like, "I don't want you to see me like this." And Rowan is like, "I've literally seen you pee your pants and throw up like at the same time and then had to carry you. So like I have seen worse, to be honest. So let me in." And Aelin is like, "Okay, just give me a minute." And Rowan's like, "What about Fenris's words set you off? Like I could tell that's what did it." And Aelin doesn't respond, but a moment later, comes out of the bathroom. Her face was gray, her eyes red-rimmed. Her voice broke as she said, "I want to talk to Lysandra." We do need to add this moment to the cry count. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you why specifically this moment makes me cry, because it would be a spoiler for later in the book. But it does indeed make me cry, because this is the moment where Aelin realizes something. And Rowan takes off because he's like so worried about Aelin and whatever is happening, and he's close enough to land that as he like takes off and starts flying, he can see Elwë, and he can tell that Elwë is burning. It is on fire. Meanwhile, back with Elide and Lorcan, Elide comes out of her room for the first time in a couple days and is talking to Lorcan because she's just started her period and she is bleeding everywhere. And Elide is like, "Hey, I need supplies." And Lorcan is like, "You smell like blood." And Elide's like, "That is because I am bleeding and it's going to get worse over the next few days, so if you get me supplies so I can deal with it." And Lorcan is like, "I'll stop at the next town. We'll be there by nightfall." And Elide's like, "Perfect, great." And Lorcan's like, "Last time you barely bled. Last time it was your cycle. You barely bled." And Elide is like, "Perhaps my body finally felt safe enough to be normal. Because even with him murdering that man, lying, and then spitting the truth about Aelin in her face, Lorcan would go up against any threat without a second thought. Perhaps for his own survival, but he'd promised her protection. She was able to sleep through the night because he lay on the floor between her and the door." And Lorcan's like, "Okay, just like checking in. Just want to make sure you're all good. Don't want you to be sickety sick." And Elide's like, "Yep, fine." As they land in this small town, and Lorcan leaves Elide at a local inn where they get to town so she can get clothes and supplies. Obviously, he's like very bad at kidnapping. She was like, "Let me off this boat. I want to go off by myself," like literally 3 days ago. And Lorcan was like, "No, you're my prisoner." And now he's like, "Bye, see you later." I mean, we know she's not going to wander off because she actually kind of like is fond of Lorcan. But like, if you need to keep someone a prisoner, you shouldn't leave them alone in town. Anyway, Lorcan goes to like the store to buy some fruits, and someone gives him pears and says, "For the lovely lady," but Lorcan didn't bring Elide to this side of town. And he starts to panic a bit. He's like, okay, it's probably just like rumors. This is a small town. People talk. But he like runs back to the boat to drop off supplies and then gets back into town. The streets have cleared and a creepy, spooky fog has rolled in. Meanwhile, Elide's at this inn and the innkeeper is being weird. And she's like, "Before you can go, you need to try on these clothes that I'm trying to sell on you." And Elide's like, "I'm sure they'll be fine." And the woman is like, "No, you need to try them on. Here, there's a chain, like, right in this room." And Elide realizes her mistake immediately when she's put in this dark room and she hears the door lock behind her. And then a candle lights behind her, and Uncle Vernon is across the table, and there's an Ilken that has like crept up behind her. And Uncle Vernon says to her, "What an adventure you've had, Elide. Your husband is unloading the supplies in the boat." Elide is like, yeah, he is my husband. Lorcan, that's my husband. You cannot take me away from him. You don't have any rights over me anymore. And Elide and Uncle Vernon is like, "Lorcan Salvatore, Maeve's second in command is your husband? Really, Elide? We're leaving now." And then he starts like taunting her. He says, "What will you do at the keep now that Manon is dead? She was gutted by her own grandmother and thrown from the keep." And Elide is like, has taken in the information of like Manon, this woman who like cared for her in her own way, being dead. They were roommates, okay? They were bestie roommates for a little bit. And her uncle has just said, she's dead. She's grappling with that. She's stressing about being taken back to Morinth, and she's also trying to figure out a way to get out of this situation. Because she's like, "I will not be taken back there. I will not be taken back there no matter what." And they go out to the garden, And there's an iron like coffin box waiting in the courtyard with 2 Ilken on either side ready to fly her to Morinth. Like, there's more Ilken out in the courtyard. There's the Ilken that, like, escorted her from inside the inn. And Elide's like, okay, I've got one chance. If he gets me in that box, he's going to get me to Morinth. And she spots that Uncle Vernon has a knife, like, in his side. Not in his side. Like, in a pocket at his side. And Elide decides she'll fight because she'd rather die here than be taken to Morinth. She's like, I'm going to fight my way out of this if it's the last thing I do. And when the Ilken, like, go to shove Elide into the box, Elide grabs for the knife. And she goes to stab herself in the heart. She just takes the knife and she turns it on herself. She, like, is going to stab herself. She knows she's not going to be able to fight off 3 Ilken and Uncle Vernon, but she can end her own life before she's taken back to that, like, hellhole. And Lorcan's watching from afar. He, like, sees what's happening, and he thinks to himself, for the first time in 5 centuries, Lorcan knew true fear as Elide turned that knife on herself. The blade angled to plunge up and into her heart. And then he takes his axe and he chucks it, and it hits Elide in the wrist, breaking her wrist. And so she has to drop the knife. It, like, knocks the dagger out of her hand. And then Lorcan starts, like, chucking axes and, I don't know, shooting bows and arrows. He's trying to help from afar. He's, like, running as fast as he can while chucking things on the roofs. And Elide's taking off running, but she's not running away. She's running towards the axe. Ugh, 'cause she's the bravest, coolest girl in all the land. And she axes one of the Ilken in the back. Her wrist is broken. Her nose is broken. She's, like, bleeding from her nose. Her wrist is... Lorcan knows it's broken. He hit her in the wrist hard enough to break it. And she's still wielding an axe that is Lorcan-sized. Remember, Lorcan is, like, probably almost 2 feet taller than her. And she's wielding this axe. Lorcan is so impressed. He's like, I'm so in love with this tiny girl. Lorcan finally gets down to where Elide is, and he's able to, like, kill the last remaining Ilken, and Uncle Vernon is, like, sobbing in the corner, and one of the Ilken that is mostly uninjured scoops him up, and they fly away. And Elide tries to chuck the axe at them, but she misses. It lands on the ground, and there's another Ilken that's there that's, like, heavily injured, and she picks up the axe, and she stomps on its injured wing, and she says to it, I want Erewhon to know that the next time he sends you after me like a pack of dogs, I'll return the favor. I want Erewhon to know that the next time I see him, I will carve Manon's name on his God's damned heart. Tears rolled down her face, silent and unending, as the wrath that now sculpted her features into a terrible thing of mighty and terrible beauty. But it really seems like tonight really isn't your night, Elide said to the Ilken, lifting the hatchet again over her shoulder. The Ilken might have been whimpering as she smiled grimly, because it only takes one to deliver a message, and your companions are already on their way there. And she takes the axe and she drops it right in his neck and kills it. And then Lorcan comes over and, like, very gently takes the axe out of her hands. And he's, like, still thinking about the fact that he, like, cannot even fathom how she was able to swing the axe with her injured wrists. And he chops off the head of the Ilken that are on the ground just to, like, be safe and sure. And the people are slowly coming out of their homes to kind of see what had happened. And Lorcan thinks about killing the innkeeper. And Elide kind of sees him going down this train of thought, and she says, enough death tonight. And so Lorcan just scoops her up and they leave. They go back to the boat. Elide is bloody and injured. She turns to Lorcan and she says, He told me you'd left. And Lorcan didn't set her down, holding her aloft with one arm as he untied the ropes, and says, you believed him. And Elide doesn't say anything back. And then Lorcan says in response, you wouldn't have stopped that dagger that was headed straight for your heart. Tears rolled down her face as she stared at the water. He didn't know how to comfort, how to soothe, not in the way she needed. Who's Manon? The wing leader of the Iron Teeth Legion, Elide said, voice trembling, the words snagging on the blood clogging her nose. She was the one who got you out that day. That's why you were in witch leathers, why you wound up wandering in Oakwald. And Elide nods as Lorcan asked her this. And Lorcan asked, and Kaltain, because at some point Uncle Vernon hadn't mentioned Kaltain. Elide says, Erewhon's mistress, his slave. She was my age. He put the stone inside her arm and made her into a living ghost. She bought me and Manon time to run. She incinerated most of Morinth in the process, and herself. And she pulls a scrap of black fabric from her pocket. Kaltain said to give this to Celaena, not to Aelin, because Celaena, she gave her a warm cloak in a cold dungeon. And they wouldn't let Kaltain take the cloak with her when they brought her to Morinth, but she managed to save this scrap, to remember to repay Celaena for that kindness. But what sort of gift is this thing? What is this? And Elide finally pulls the wordstone out so Lorcan can see out of her pocket. And even Lorcan is like, whoa. Even Lorcan's death magic knows to fear that thing. That thing is not something they should be messing with. And Lorcan's like, actually, put that away. And he's like, let's clean you up, and we're going to set your nose and your wrist, and I will tell you what I know while we do. And Lorcan reaches out and holds her face and forces her to look at him. Hopeless, bleak eyes met his. He brushed away a stray tear with his thumb. I made a promise to protect you. I will not break it, Elide. She made to pull away, but he gripped her a little harder, keeping her eyes on him. I will always find you, he swore to her. Her throat bobbed. Lorcan whispered, I promise. Lorcan tells her everything he knows about Aelin and the word keys and the word gates. I killed those things, Elide said. You did a fine job at it, he said. I don't regret it. Dark, depthless eyes slid to her. Good. She didn't know why she said it, why she felt a need or like it was worth anything to him at all, but Elide stood on her toes, kissed his stubble-ruffed cheek and said, I will always find you too, Lorcan. She felt him staring at her even when she climbed into bed minutes later. When she awoke, clean strips of linen for her next cycle were in the bed. His own shirt, washed and dried overnight, now cut up for her to use as he would. Yeah. Lorcan literally cuts the shirt off of his back so Elide can bleed on it. He says, oh, we didn't actually have time to get you to pick you up tampons at the store. Don't even worry, you can just use my clothes. That's all we get from Elide and Lorcan for the mom. Let's continue forward. Back in, well, south of Elway. They're sailing past a burning Elway for 3 days, and Aelin and Rowan did what they can from the boat, but they can't stop. They don't have time to like stop and help the people of Elway. And Rowan flies in and talks to them, and each time they say darkness swept over them in the night, and then flaming arrows would strike the town. But no sign of Erewhon's forces or Maeve was there. Like, they don't really know who exactly set these flames. Ghosts, some villagers were now claiming, had attacked them, the ghosts of their unburied dead, raging home from distant lands, until they started whispering another rumor, that Aelin Galathinius herself was burning Elway, village by village, for vengeance that they had not aided her kingdom 10 years ago. No matter that she was putting out the flames, they did not believe Rowan when he tried to explain who soothed their fires from aboard the distant ship. He had told her not to listen, not to let it sink in, so she tried. And it had been during one of those times that Rowan had run his thumb over the scar on her palm, leaning to kiss her neck. He breathed her in, and she knew he detected an answer to the question that had caused him to flee that morning on the ship. No, she was not carrying his child. Oh, this one really... Oh, add another one to the cry count, because this one did make me cry. This book, I feel like, really, we get, like, so many fun chapters with the pirates of Skulls Bay. The first half. And the second half is really a downer. She made this promise to Nehemia that she would help the people of Elway. That this is, like, Elway is, like, a close second to Terrasen in terms of Aelin's priorities, and to know that these people think that she's the one burning down their villages, it just, like, really hurts my feelings, okay? Anyway, they, like, talk about the fact that Aelin is not pregnant, and they, like, talk about it a little bit. Honestly, I feel like this is chucked in there because, like, she throws up, and it, like, anytime, like, a girl who is, like, sexually active in a novel throws up, everyone's, like, the first response is, like, she must be pregnant. Aelin is not preggers. But they, like, have a conversation around it because Aelin has not been taking her tonic, her birth control tonic. But the Fae have, like, a really hard time conceiving, and Aelin suspects that because she has Fae blood that she'll probably have a difficult time as well. And she tells Rowan that if she does fall pregnant, she will take it as an opportunity to claim an heir for Terrasen. Like, that feels important to her, to leave Terrasen with an heir. And then they arrive at the Stone Marshes. And Manon is coming with them to go to the marshes to find the lock, because Aelin knows that she will, like, literally eat everyone up on the cruise ship. She will literally eat everyone up on the deck of the ship if she's left alone. And so she's like, you gotta come with us. But Abraxas can't come. I don't know why Abraxas can't come. Why can't he come? He can just, like, fly along with them. Aelin says Abraxas can't come. And he can't stay on the ship because some of the boys are scared of him. The crew that they're leaving on the ship are scared of him. So, which is stupid. Braxy's a little angel. So Braxis has to go, like, do something else, entertain himself while they're gone. And Braxis is not happy about being separated from Manon because they've been together since, like, the moment he took her out of the dungeons. And Manon says to him, don't whine about it. Manon said, even as something twisted and roiled in her belly. Stay out of sight, keep alert, and come back in 4 days' time. She allowed herself to lean forward, resting her brow against his snout. His growl rumbled in her bones. We've been a pair, you and I. A few days is nothing, my friend. You've saved my life many, many times. I never thank you for it. Abraxas let out another low whine. You and me, she promised, from now until the darkness claims us. And then she sends him away. I hate it. Why can't Abraxas come? He's a nice boy. And Manon thinks as she watches Abraxas fly away. She had never hated anyone more than she hated the Queen of Terracin and her friends for making him leave, for causing this parting, when so many dangers had not been able to cleave them. Honestly, me too. I've never hated Aelin either, but why can't Abraxas come with them? It would be nice. He would be a nice boy and he would have a nice time. And Manon's like watching everyone get ready. And she thinks to herself that watching them get ready, it reminded her of the 13, but she refuses to even think about them, to consider that Astrid might really be gone. Because remember, the Bloodhound was like, she's dead. Here's her bracelet. She's like, we don't have enough evidence to know that is true or not. Like, I can't even, like, contemplate it unless I know for sure that they're gone. And in that moment, she takes off her half-sister Rhiannon's cloak, the Crochet witch she had killed. And, she's been wearing her cloak since she killed her back in Airfire, and she takes it off and lets her cloak be carried off in the wind, and it looks like blood as it settles over the water. And Aelin Galathinius said quietly, "You never stop seeing their faces." It was only like as Manon is looking out at this cloak that's blood on the water. It was only when they were rowing for shore, spindrift soaking them, that Manon realized that the Queen hadn't met the 13. And Manon wondered if Aelin too had watched that cloak floating out to sea and thought it looked like spilled blood. Like, I love the moments between Aelin and Manon because I do think they are, like, so similar in a lot of ways. And I think this moment of acknowledgement of, like, Aelin being like, I have also killed people that I shouldn't have. I have took lives of people that did not deserve to die. And just, like, a recognition of that weight, that heaviness that Manon and her both carry. Back to Elide and Lorcan. Elide and Lorcan have been traveling, but they've changed courses a bit because Lorcan felt the nudge of the goddess's hand, and Lorcan listens to that goddess hand's nudge. And honestly, Elide also has like a goddess who nudges her, so they're both goddess-led. And his current plan is vaguely to get Elide to Aelin and then steal the 2 word keys, then head to Morinth to find the 3rd. And he knows he won't survive the mission. Like, he knows that at some point he's going to end up dead or Maeve is going to kill him. He knows he has to do it anyway. They're leaving the boat. So this is their path, sort of. They took this purple train all the way over to the Stone Marshes. Or not the Stone Marshes. They're headed towards the Stone Marshes, honestly. They'll be there in like 2 pages. But they followed the river southwest, and now that they're walking. Like, they followed it to like essentially the end. And obviously Team Aelin is also about to start hiking into the Stone Marshes. The Stone Marshes are pretty big. They're not going to bump into each other super quickly. They will bump into each other. Spoiler. Obviously, they're going to the same spot. Lorcan and Elide arrive at the Stone Marshes from north on the land, and Elide is immediately like, this place has terrible vibes. She says, I don't think this is a place. This is a place for the living, Lorcan. Why would Aelin come here? And Lorcan is like, I don't know, but he knows that they like need to continue moving forward. Like, they need to just like keep it moving. They've been traveling through the Stone Marshes for 2 days, and they're like having this conversation. And Elide is like, who lived here? And Lorcan says that people who were forgotten long before I was born. And there are like beasts in the gross swamp water, which makes traveling slow. Also, the dead appear in their dreams and whisper to them. So that's pleasant. Occasionally they spot a monster, and Lorcan will pick up Elide, throw her over his shoulder, and they'll run away. That night, Elide and Lorcan are trying to sleep. It's their 4th night in the Stone Marshes. Elide's exhausted, but there's spooky ooky howling coming from outside. Lorcan is trying to like soothe her. I'm going to probably read you too much of this flirty little scene between Elide and Lorcan because honestly I will take joy where I can in this back half of the novel because it's kind of a little bit of a downer. Okay? Anyway, Elide asks Lorcan about Maeve. She asks, will she truly kill you for what you've done? A nod. Yet you risk it for her sake. Do you love her? And Lorcan says, I have been in love with Maeve since I first laid eyes on her. Elide says, are you her lover? And Lorcan says, no, I offered once. She laughed at me for the insolence, so I have made myself invaluable in other ways. And Elide says, perhaps she uses your love to her own advantage. Perhaps it's in her best interest to drag you along. Maybe she'll change her mind when it seems like when you seem the most likely to leave. And Lorcan says, I am blood sworn to her. I will never leave. And Elide thinks her chest hurt at that. Then she can rest assured knowing you'll pine after her for eternity. And Lorcan says, do not make the mistake of believing me to be a romantic fool. I do not hold any shred of hope for her. Elide says, that does not seem like love at all. And Lorcan says, what do you know of love? I thought you had no experience being romantic at all. And Elide says, I think love should make you happy. It should make you into the best possible version of yourself. And she thinks of her own parents and watching them growing up. And Lorcan says, are you implying I am neither of those things? And Elide says, I don't even think you know what happiness is. I don't think you've been happy a day in your literal life, Lorcan. And Lorcan says, I do not mind being around you. And Elide says, is that a compliment? And then Lorcan leans over and like caresses her face a little bit. There's some face caressing. It's very sweet. The kiss was soft and quiet and brief. Barely a grazing of her lips against his. She thought Lorcan might have been trembling as she pulled back, as heat bloomed across her cheeks. But she made herself say, surprised to find her voice steady, "You don't need to answer me now or ever. You could show up on my doorstep in 10 years and the offer would still stand. But there is a place for you in Pranth, if you should ever need or wish for it." Something like agony rippled in his eyes, the most human expression she'd ever seen him make. But as he leaned forward, despite the marshes, despite what had gathered in the world, for the first time in 10 years, Elide found herself not at all afraid, as Lorcan caressed her lips with his own, not afraid of anything, as he did it again, kissing one corner of her mouth and then another. And then Lorcan and Elide just like make out for a while in the temple ruins. And then darkness seems to spread over, the sky is open in this temple. And darkness seems to spread across the sky, blotting out the stars. And Lorcan's like, oh, we need to start running. That's actually an Ilken army. And Elide immediately knows they aren't headed for her, but for Aelin. Meanwhile, at the other end of the Stone Marshes, Aelin and the gang have been walking through the Stone Marshes for 2.5 days. Everyone's having a bad time and getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. But Manon doesn't actually mind. Manon's like, actually, I think it's kind of nice and cozy here. And Aelin makes herself a little shield so the bugs can't get her. And Rowan's like surveying the land in hawk form, as Lysandra is the form of a swamp thing. We're not like explicitly given a lot of dimensions of the swamp thing. I pictured her as an alligator. Nearly to the lock. Rowan was able to see it while he was flying, but they're going to need to camp for the night before they make it there. They're not going to be able to make it there in one go. And they're eating some mystery swamp meat that Fenris and Gabrielle caught and like camping for the night. They're on a little island. Rowan has a little shield up so none of the swamp monsters come and get them. And Aelin makes a comment about how Dorian still eats like a fine lady, which is the comment he made, or Aelin made, one of them made, like way back when they were like little bitty babies when Dorian came and visited Terracin when they were like young kids. And Dorian bows and is like, I will take that as a compliment. They're like joking around, they're like teasing, they're having a nice time. And Aelin pulls out the eye of Elena and she's just like looking at it, examining it. When all of a sudden a giant swamp creature comes up behind Manon and swallows her up. But Dorian's magic is able to stop it. He uses his shadow hands to like, I don't know, pry open the swamp creature's mouth, I think. And Dorian is like teasing because he's like holding back the creature. Manon is like still right there. And Dorian says, shall I kill it or set it free? And Manon says, free it. And Dorian just like picks it up and chucks it way off into the swamp. Aelin and Rowan are having an eyeball combo about how it's so convenient that Rowan's shield disappeared the moment a monster appeared. Also that hole by the monster appeared right by Manon. And Rowan is like, it seemed like a good time for a magic lesson. And then, remember, Aelin has the Eye of Elena out, and Manon looks over and points at that necklace and it says, what is that? And Aelin says, the Eye of Elena, it was a gift. But, like, Manon doesn't, like, drop it at that. She, like, starts to write something in the, like, the muddy earth that's under the dirt that's beneath them. She draws a large circle and 2 overlapping circles, one on top of the other, within its circumference. That is the 3-faced goddess, Manon said, her voice low. We call this, she drew a rough line in the centermost circle, in the eye-shaped space where they overlapped, the eye of the goddess, not Elena. She circled the exterior again. Crone, she said at the outermost circumference. She circled the interior top circle. Mother, she circled the bottom. Maiden. She stabbed the eye inside, and the heart of darkness within her. That is an iron teeth symbol. Blue blood prophets have it tattooed over their hearts, and those who have won valor in battle. When we lived in the waste, they were once given those to mark our glory, our being goddess blessed. And Aelin remembers the necklace responding when she encountered Baba Yellowlegs, and she thought it was just like a warning at the time, like, watch out, this witch is scary. But maybe it was like a mark of recognition. And Manon says, the magic worked before you, like, freed magic. And Aelin says, I was told certain objects were exempt. Baba Yellowlegs knew the entire history of the word keys and the gates. She was the one who told me about them. Is that part of your history too? Manon's like, not really, but Baba Yellowlegs was an ancient. She knew things that are now lost to us. She ripped down the walls of the Crescent city herself. And Dorian says, I heard that was a brutal battle. And Manon says, that killing field, the last I heard, is still barren. Not a blade of grass grows on it. They say it's from Rhiannon Crescent's curse, or from the blood that's soaked it for the final 3 weeks of that war. Rhiannon and Crescent held the gates to her city for 3 days and 3 nights against the 3 Iron Teeth matrons. Her sisters were dead around her, her children slaughtered, her consort spiked to one of the Iron Teeth war caravans. The last Crescent queen, the final hope of their 1,000-year dynasty, she did not go gently. It was only when she fell at dawn on the 4th day that the city was truly lost. And as she lay dying on that killing field, as the Iron Teeth ripped open the walls of that city around her and butchered her people, she cursed us. Cursed the 3 matrons and through them all Iron Teeth. She cursed Yellowlegs herself, who gave Rhiannon the finishing blow. None of them moved or spoke or breathed too loudly. Rhiannon swore on her last breath that we would win the war, but not the land. That, for what we had done, we would inherit the land only to see it wilt and die in our hands. Our beasts would shrivel and keel over dead. Our witchlings would be stillborn, poisoned by the streams and rivers. Fish would rot in lakes before we could catch them. Rabbits and deer would flee across the mountains, and the once verdant witch kingdom would become a wasteland. The Iron Teeth laughed at it, drunk on Crescent blood, until the first Iron Teeth witchling was born, dead, and then another, until the cattle rotted in the fields and the crops withered overnight. By the end of the month there was no food. By the second, the 3 Iron Teeth clans were turning on each other, ripping themselves to pieces. So the matrons ordered us all into exile. Separated the clans to cross the mountains and wander as we would. Every few decades they would send groups to try to work the land to see if the curse still held. Those groups never returned. We have been wanderers for 500 years, the wound made worse by the fact that humans eventually took it for themselves, and the land responded to them. But you planned to return to it still, Dorian asked. Those golden eyes were not of this earth. Rhiannon and Crescent said that there was only one way. Only one to break the curse. Manon swallowed and recited in a cold, tight voice, blood to blood and soul to soul. Together this was done. Only together can it be undone. Be the bridge, be the light. When iron melts, when flowers spring from fields of blood, let the land be witness and return home. Manon toyed with the end of her braid, the scrap of red cloak she tied around it. Every Iron Teeth witch in the world has pondered that curse. For 5 centuries we have tried to break it. And your parents. Their union was made in order to break that curse, Aelin pushed carefully. A sharp nod. I did not know that Rhiannon's bloodline survived and now ran through Manon's blue veins. And Dorian's like, okay, cool, but Elena predates that by like 1,000 years. What's the connection between like this witch symbol and the Eye of Elena? And Aelin is like, now you understand why Elena is so hard to work with. She literally never gives us all the details. The girl gives me literally nothing. And then the blonde boys they go off to chit chat, and Fenris is like, you should get Aelin out of here tonight. And he says, whatever awaits us tomorrow has been waiting for a long time, Rowan. And Rowan is like, how do you know that? And Gabrielle is like, think about it. That witch and Aelin are obviously connected. We've been led to this moment by forces we cannot understand. 2 females whose paths cross tonight in a way we've rarely witnessed. 2 queens who might control either half of this continent. 2 sides of one coin. Both half-breeds. Manon, an Iron Teeth and a Crescent. Aelin, human and fae. Rowan finished for him. Between them, they cover the 3 main races of this earth. Between the 2 of them, they are mortal and immortal. One worships fire, the other darkness. Do I need to go on? It feels as if we are playing right into the hands of whoever has been running this game for eons. And Gabrielle says, Maeve has waited centuries for someone to lead her to the caves. When Maeve and Aelin finally meet, it will be carnage. It is not going to end well. And then Gabrielle says to Rowan, you've already been replaced. Like, Maeve has already replaced you in the cadre. She has promoted Karn. Another bombshell has entered the villa. This is Karn. He's a sadist. Karn, no amount of training, both on the battlefield and off, had ever broken the Fae warrior of his penchant for cruelty. Rowan had locked him up, flogged him, disciplined him, wielded whatever shred of compassion he could muster to himself. Nothing. Karn had been born savoring the suffering of others. And Rowan had, always, tried to put him, way far away because, he was bad news bears. But apparently now he's one of the blood-oathed warriors of Maeve. Great. And Gabrielle is like, Maeve's plan is probably to have Aelin wear herself out fighting Erewhon and then strike when she's the weakest. Also, we still serve her. We're still blood-oathed to Maeve. She's probably just, waiting for the moment to strike. And also, we still do need to kill Lorcan. And Rowan is like, yeah, I know. And Fenris is like, no, she's being super weird. This is not her usual style is slow, drawn-out torture, but she wants Lorcan dead and buried. This is not like her at all. And Fenris thinks it's because Maeve fears that Lorcan will ally with Aelin, because he's the second strongest male after Rowan. Maeve has already lost Rowan to Aelin, and the boys think that maybe she's worried about losing Lorcan to her as well. And then they get back to camp, and Aelin and Lysandra are slept curled up next to each other, and Aedion is just on the other side of them. And Fenrys says to Rowan, kill me. If that order is given, kill me, Rowan, before I have to do it. Meaning the order to kill Aelin. Anything that will put Aelin to harm. And Rowan says, you'll be dead before you can get within a foot of her. Not a threat, a promise, and a plain statement of fact. Fenrys' shoulders slumped in thanks. I'm glad you know, Fenrys said with an unusual graveness, that I got this time, that Maeve unintentionally gave me that I got to know what it was like to be here, as a part of this. Rowan didn't have words, so he looked to Gavriel, but the lion was merely nodding as he stared down at the little camp below, and at his sleeping son. And I am crying again, add another one to the cry count. The next morning they set out, and Lysandra is being a little swamp viper. On their way, Manon and Dorian are a little chit-chatting, and Manon says, so how is this key situation going to get rid of the Valg and Erewhon? Like, why are we looking for keys again? And Dorian is like, I don't know. Aelin probably knows, though, and she, like, might tell us later if she wants. We'll find out when she wants us to find out. And Manon is like, is she going to be the one who decides who gets banished? Like, if this key, like, banishes people, does she get to pick? And Dorian's like, probably whoever holds the key gets to decide, and you'd better pray to whatever wicked gods you worship that Aelin is the one holding them in the end. And Manon is like, what about you? And Dorian says, why should I wish to go anywhere near one of those things? And Manon says, you're just as powerful as she is. You could wield them. Why not? And Dorian says, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm kind of a bad guy. I killed my dad and exploded the glass castle. You don't want me in charge of this. I would do the same thing across the whole continent. And I mean, that's true. I, like, don't want him in charge. I think Dorian would be really bad at being in charge. And Manon says, why? And Dorian says, because she died. And even before she did, this world saw to it that she suffered and was afraid and alone. And even though no one will remember who she was, I do. I will never forget the color of her eyes or the way she smiled, and I will never forgive them for taking her away. And Manon says, good. And honestly, this actually, like, really, this conversation between Manon and Dorian really makes me angry. At Dorian, particularly. Because Manon is correct. Like, Dorian, I mean, maybe, I don't know. It really seems like Aelin has significantly more power than Dorian, but maybe they have the same amount of power. Maybe Dorian's just bad at it. Quite possible. But the fact that Dorian's like, no, this isn't actually an Aelin responsibility, because it is a responsibility. Like, this is responsibility and burden that is upon Aelin. As we will, like, continue to find out throughout this book and into the next book. Like, this is just burden. Like, it's not, like, a super fun thing. And Dorian refusing to even, like, I don't think Aelin would, like, allow him to take on the burden of holding this, really. But for Dorian to be like, her problem is so... it, like, really grinds my gears, because I would just be terrible, because, like, my girlfriend got beheaded by my dad in front of me. And it's like, Aelin has lost so much. She has lost more than Dorian. She's lost more than Dorian. In terms of the fact that she, like, lost both of her parents when she was super young, and then the man who became, like, a father figure to her, she was responsible also for killing. She killed her, like, evil father figure, Erebin. She also lost her, like, first love, Sam. Like, she's been through just, like, so... everything that Dorian has been through, Aelin has been through, and then some. And I, like, understand that Dorian is, like, it's a good thing that Dorian is not hungry for, like, the power that this holds, or for revenge, but for Aelin to hold that burden is difficult. And it frustrates me that Dorian is unwilling to, like, have at least those conversations around bearing a little bit of that in any capacity. Again, Dorian doesn't get enough Dorian hate. Dorian slander, we don't get enough of it. Dorian is a precious angel gem. I love him. He's a sweet, sweet boy. But he's not a perfect boy. They arrive at the lock midday, and the vibes are shockingly, and by shockingly I mean not at all shocking, rancid. And Lysandra turns into a swamp creature and checks the water. It's all clear. And everyone's like, this feels like it's a little too easy. Maybe it is. And then Rowan and Aelin flirt, and they start to head into this, like, maze of pillars. And Aelin and Manon wind up walking next to each other, and they have a chat about their swords' names. And Aelin asks Manon what is her sword named, and Manon goes, Wind Cleaver, and Aelin goes, that's a good name. And Manon goes, yours? And Aelin says, Goldrin, and Manon says, that's not a good name. And Aelin says, blame my ancestor. And she certainly did, for many, many things, as she should. Her ancestors, boo. And then they kind of split off. Manon's headed in one direction, Aelin and Rowan are headed in the other, and Aelin turns to Rowan and says, that sunrise when Mola appeared to you, what exactly did she say? And Rowan's like, why? Her heart turned thunderous, and maybe it made her a coward to say it now. Rowan gripped her elbow as she read her body, scented her fear and pain, Aelin. But before they can continue down that path, there is a trunk on some sort of altar that is separated from them by a little sliver of water. And Manon appears, like, over on that altar. Like, they separated, but she wound up wandering around the hallways and ended up in the same room. And immediately starts for the trunk. And so Aelin joins her up on this altar looking at this trunk. And they haven't opened it yet, but word marks are carved all over the top. And the girlies are looking down at it, trying to figure out what to do when Rowan goes still, as he feels something kind of like touch him, and it's Lorcan's warning signal. And Lysandra pops back up, and she says, hey, there's an aerial legion coming our way with 500 Ilken. Meanwhile, Elide and Lorcan are just running through the swamp as Lorcan keeps shooting the warning at Rowan and Aelin, just like hoping it will get to them in time. And he's so worried about Aelin losing the word key, but also about Elide being so sad. Double whammy. He like doesn't want to get all the way this way to Aelin and then find her dead. Elide will be so bummed. And he doesn't want Elide to be so bummed. Also, he doesn't want the Ilken taking the word key away from Aelin. So they're trying to get there so they can help in this fight against the Ilken. And so they're running, and Aelin is like, yikes, what are we gonna do? There's nowhere to go. We're in the middle of like literally nowhere. There's 8 of them against 500 Ilken. And Rowan is like, okay, we're gonna have to use the ruins to like create bottlenecks. This is like a battle that we can like try to strategize and use strategy to win. And Fenris is like, we will divide it up and take them out before they can get close enough while they're still up in the air. And Aelin says, there's another way. No, was Rowan's response. There is nothing and no one out here. The risk of using the key would be minimal. And Rowan says, no, and that's final. And then Aelin says, too quietly, you do not get to give me orders. I'm the queen here, prince. And Rowan says, you will have to pry that key out of my cold, dead hands. I'm not going to give it to you. So, are you going to kill me for it? And he meant it too. He'd make her kill him before he'd let her use the key in any capacity beyond wielding the lock. Aedion says, you wanted to show off. This is Erewhon's response. Aedion has a very short temper. Aedion really grinds my gears in these last few books. I think Aedion gets the appropriate amount of slander, to be honest. Aedion is like, why, in this moment, is like, Aelin, this is your fault. This is your fault because you were showing off in Skull's Bay. And Aelin is like, you're blaming me? And Aedion is like, we should have stayed up north. And Aelin is like, I had no choice. We had to come down here. You were there when the goddess took over my freaking body, Aedion. What did you want us to do? And Aedion's like, you've had a choice all along. You opted to flash around your magic. Aelin is like, oh, so I guess the you're perfect just the way you are stage is over in our relationship. And Aedion is like, this isn't a game. This is war. And you pushed and pushed for Erewhon to show his hand. You refused to run your schemes by us first, to let us weigh in when we have fought wars. And Gabriel's like, hey, maybe we could do this another time, guys. And Aedion just literally ignores them. And he's like, where are our allies, Aelin? Where are our armies? All we have to show for our efforts is a pirate lord who might very well change his mind if he hears about this from the wrong lips. And Rowan says, we do need to get ready if we're going to battle these guys. I know you guys are having a little tiff, and I do want to respect that, but 500 Ilken are coming for us right this second. And Aelin is like, magic might not be enough to last against them, but steel will. Tell Rowan and Aedion to plan the battle. And so boys go and plan in the corner, and Manon goes and climbs some ruins with her bow and arrow. She's going to go help out. And Aelin pulls Lysandra aside and is like, you don't need to fight. You can stay here with Manon. And Lysandra is like, don't even worry. I'm going to turn into a swamp beast. I will get all the swamp beasties riled up, so if any of the Ilken land, the creatures will eat them up. And Dorian just hangs out. Again, Dorian is along for the ride. He says, I could bear some of this responsibility, or I could just sit back and watch you guys do it. Here's the plan. Aedion, Gabriel, Fenris are going to funnel the Ilken towards Rowan, Dorian, and Aelin, the magic guys. And Rowan is trying to coach Dorian on how to appropriately use his magic when Dorian is like, I'm not going to be his prisoner again. Like, either we are able to fight them effectively, or like, I don't want to be alive. And Aelin is like trying to shut out what he meant by it, but Manon said from the wall above them, an arrow now knocked loosely in her bow. If it comes to that princeling, I'll kill you before they can. Aelin hissed, you'll do no such thing. But both of them ignored her as Dorian said, thank you. And Aelin is like, none of you are being taken prisoner. I'm going to deal with it. It will be fine. And then she says, I get the first shot. And she thinks to herself that she planned on being the only shot. And she decided to see finally how deep the well of power within her like went all the way to the bottom. We're not stopping at that little like crust that she stopped at last time. We're tunneling all the way down through that. And so Aelin heads off, and she can tell that Rowan is pissed. Like, he's in a bad mood. He's cranky. And Aelin says, I know. Just add it, suggesting to use the word key to that tally of all the horrible things I say and do. And then Rowan says, Aelin. Rowan's voice cut across water and plant and wind. She paused, looking over her shoulder at where he stood, as if on the sandbank, as if it had been impossible not to follow her. The strong, unyielding bones of his face were set with a warrior's brutality, but his pine-green eyes were as bright, almost soft as he said, remember who you are. Every step of the way down and every step of the way back, remember who you are and that you are mine. Aelin's been in the middle of her well of power for days now, just in case she needs it, but now she tunnels down. The deeper she goes, the more it feels like the magic is like literally compressing her. It's described kind of like as like when you go deep underwater, and like, you know what happened to the ocean cruise, that submarine that visited the Titanic? That's kind of what it feels like is happening to Aelin. Deeper and deeper, Aelin shot into her power. Aelin knew she'd reached the former edge of her power thanks to warning bells in her blood that pealed in her wake. That pealed as she launched herself into the burning depths of hell. The queen of flame and shadow. The heir of fire. Aelin of the wildfire. Fireheart. She burned through each title, even as she became them. Became what those foreign ambassadors had hissed when they reported on a child queen's growing unstable power in Terrasen. A promise that had been whispered into the blackness. The pressure began to build in her head, in her veins, far behind, safely out of her range. She felt the flickers of Rowan and Dorian's magic, as they rallied against the blast that would answer her own. Aelin soared into the uncharted core of her power. The inferno went on and on. Meanwhile, Lorcan and Elide are like running. Lorcan knows they aren't going to be fast enough. The Ilken are going to reach Aelin before they're able to. And Elide has Athriel's ring on, and because Lorcan gave it to her, and she hadn't questioned where it had come from, or what it did when he'd slipped the ring onto her finger this morning. He'd only warned her to never take it off, that it might be the one thing to keep her safe from the Ilken, from Moranth. And way off in the distance, so far that only Lorcan can see them, is Rowan. He spots Rowan's hair. He's like, oh my gosh, I know that blondie! His ashy white blonde hair. And then he sees Aelin, and then he like continues looking, and he sees Aelin, and he realizes they're on the wrong side. They're not approaching them from behind to like join their fight, but they're on the same side as the Ilken. Like the Ilken and them are running the same way, and they are directly in the line of fire for Aelin's power. And he can feel the power that Aelin is reaching for. It is literally shaking the ground as Aelin tunnels into her magic, and he's like, oh no, this is really bad news. And Lorcan jumps on Elide and covers her body with his body. What is Elide breathed, but Lorcan lunged for her, hurling them to the ground, covering her body with his. He threw a shield over them, plummeting hard and fast into his magic, the drop nearly uncontrolled. He didn't have time to do anything but pour every ounce of his power into his shield, into that one barrier that would keep them from being melted into nothing. And then this is what Lorcan is thinking. Whitethorn knew, even at Mistward, that the queen hadn't yet stepped into her birthright, knew that this sort of power came around once in an eon, and to serve her, a court that wouldn't just change the world, it would start the world over. A court that could conquer this world, any others that it wished, if that woman on the plain desired to. And that was the question, wasn't it? And then at that, Lysandra gives the signal, and Aelin bursts into flame. Well, not her, but she like burst essentially the entire swamp into flame. Even with Aelin's aim away from them, even with Rowan's shield, the heat of that fire burned, like according to Lysandra. Holy gods, Aedion found himself saying as he stumbled back through the reeds, falling further behind the line of attack. Holy rutting gods. The heart of the Legion didn't even have the chance to scream as they were washed away in a sea of flame. Aelin was no savior to rally behind, but a cataclysm to be weathered. There was a cost. There had to be such a cost to such power. She had been born knowing the weight of her crown, her magic, had felt its isolation long before she had reached adolescence, and that had seemed like punishment enough. But then there had to be a price. Nameless is my price. That was what the witch had said. Understanding glimmered at the edge of Aedion's mind, just out of grasp. He fired his second-to-last arrow, straight between the eyes of a frantic Ilken. One by one, their own foul-bred resistance to magic yielded to those bursts of ice and wind and flame. Meanwhile, Lorcan is really just, like, trying to hold his shield up as, like, the world ignites around them. He's, like, trying to hold the shield, like, as small as possible and as just, like, firmly as possible because this fire is just, like, trying to literally cook them alive. Like, the fish are boiling in the water around them. The grasses have turned to ash. Like, the Ilken are just, like, dropping like flies around them. And Elide is, like, clinging to Lorcan as he covers her whole body with his. Wave after wave, the magic battered his power. A lesser gift might have been broken against it. A lesser magic might have tried to fight back, not just let the power wash over them. If Erewhon had gotten a collar around Aelin Galathanis's neck, it would be over. To leash that woman, that power, would a collar even be able to contain that? And he is just, like, watching from under this shield as Rowan starts walking towards Aelin. Her flames flickered out as he reaches her. Lorcan didn't dare lift his shield, not as the prince stepped onto the small island where the queen was standing, not as Aelin turned towards Rowan, and the only flame that remained was a crown of fire atop her head. Lorcan watched in silence as Rowan slid a hand over her waist, the other cupping the side of her face, and kissed his queen. Ember stirred in her unbound hair as she wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed close. A golden crown of flame flickered to life atop Rowan's head, the twin to the one Lorcan had seen burning that day at Mistward. He knew Whitethorn. He knew this prince wasn't ambitious, not in the way that immortals could be. He likely would have loved the woman if she had been ordinary. But this power, in his wasteland of a soul, Lorcan felt that tug and hated it. Lorcan drops the shield, and they start walking towards Rowan and Aelin, and ash keeps falling from the literally burnt up Ilken, keeps falling in Elide's hair, and so Lorcan makes her a little shield hat so the ash doesn't get in her hair anymore. And Elide is like, what do we do now? And Lorcan realizes that Aelin is drained of all her power, so is Rowan and Dorian, and most of them are, like, they're tired, they're worn out now, and there would be no better opportunity to attack. And so Lorcan is like, we say hello. We go approach them and say hello. And Elide's like, I don't know if this is the best idea, you guys aren't really on the best of terms. And Lorcan is like, it's okay. Liar, liar, pants on fire. His plan is to attack Aelin. His current plan is to attack Aelin. But he was too busy plotting what he's going to do to attack Aelin, get his word key back from her, that he doesn't notice that Fenris and Gabriel slip from Aelin and Rowan's side and turn into their forms and are stalking through the reeds towards them. And Elide starts to feel nervous to finally seeing Aelin after all these years. She thinks to herself, she had imagined Aelin's power, dreamed of how it had shattered the glass castle. She hadn't considered the reality of seeing it unleashed on the world would make her bones quake in terror. And she can tell that Lorcan's, like, in a bad mood next to her. She can tell that, like, rage has taken over Lorcan's body. And as Aelin and Rowan turn towards them, Rowan steps in front of Aelin. There's, like, a little sidestep because Rowan obviously is always protecting Aelin. And Elide is like, maybe I shouldn't have come with Lorcan. Like, he's really giving off bad vibes. I don't want them to think I also am bad vibes. And Lorcan is like, don't even worry. Once our bargain is over now, I will make sure they know that, like, we only travel together, like, we aren't actually friends. Okay, Elide, don't even worry. But then Elide feels a gentle hand touch her shoulder. Pay attention, look around. She looks around, but she doesn't see anything, but the voice is insistent, and she realizes there is a mountain lion in the brush, and she screams Lorcan's name. They've kind of, like, separated at this point. Lorcan is, like, I think, like, 20 steps ahead of her or so. She screams Lorcan's name, and obviously he runs for her. He, like, immediately takes his eyes off Aelin. He does not give a crap. Turns around and he starts running for Elide because he assumes that she is injured, and, like, that's why he is calling for him. And she's sprinting towards him when the mountain lion, immediately followed by the wolf, jump on Lorcan and start attacking him. Elide's freaking out and she's running towards them, but she falls, slices her palm open, something cracks in her leg, but then she gets up and she continues running, and she realizes that these guys aren't, like, attacking Lorcan in order to just, like, fight him. They're like, this is an execution. They're planning on killing him. And she leaps on Lorcan's back. She covers as much of his back as she can with her body, and the wolf bites her arm instead of Lorcan's neck where he was aiming. And then he, like, backs up, and Elide waits for them to, like, kill her. She, like, is covering Lorcan just to buy him a little bit more time. She's, like, waiting for the killing blow. And then Lorcan flips her over, his breathing ragged, his face bloody and pale as he looked in her face, and he just says to her, Elide, 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 as she's, like, bleeding out in her arm. She couldn't draw breath, couldn't see around her, the sensation of her arm, that her arm was mere shredded flesh and splintered bone. Lorcan grabbed her face before she could look and snapped, why did you do that? Why? He growled to the lion and then the wolf, his shield a swirling obsidian wind around them. You are dead. You are both dead. And they shift back into their person form, Fenris and Gabriel. Lorcan has found some more magic to make a shield up, and Fenris is like, we were ordered, Lorcan, and then Lorcan says, damn your orders to hell, you stupid bastard. And Fenris is like, we can't fight against the command for much longer, Lorcan. And then Gabriel is like, put the shield down. Can heal the girl. Like, if you put the shield down, we'll help her, and then we're gonna have to kill you. And Lorcan's like, I'm gonna kill you both. I'll kill you. Elide looks down at her arm, realizes how literally torn up and, like, bleeding. It hit an artery. She's, like, bleeding out pretty badly, and her vision starts to tunnel, and Lorcan is like, hey, don't look. Lorcan snapped, squeezing her face again to draw her eyes up to his own. His face was lined with such wrath she barely recognized it, but he made no move against the males. Elide realizes he doesn't have much power left, and he's using most of it to shield them against because he used most of it to shield against Aelin's flames, and, like, the shield is not going to last very long. He does not have enough time to make sure she is safe and also to get out of there. And again, Lorcan says to Gabriel, you heal her and then we continue. And Elide is like, no, you need to get out of here. And then Lorcan turns to Elide and says very quietly before he drops the shield, I wanted to go to Parenth with you. Okay. I wanted to go to Parenth with you. Literally, shoot me in the heart. Like, oh my gosh. It was not a hard choice, and it did not frighten him, not nearly as much as the fatal wound in her arm did. Fenrir said it hit an artery. She'd bleed out in minutes. Lorcan had been born from and gifted with darkness. Returning to it would not be a difficult task, but letting that glimmering, lovely light before him die out. In his ancient, bitter bones, he could not accept it. She had been forgotten by everyone and everything, and still had hoped. And still she had been kind to him. And still had offered him a glimpse of peace in the time he had known her. She had offered him a home. Ugh. I am indeed cried in the club at the tally. And Lorcan thinks to himself, I hope she doesn't watch as they kill me. And Elide is just pleading for Lorcan to put his shields back up as he drops the shields. And Elide is just pleading for him to put the shields back up. And she's sobbing as Gabriella starts to tend to her arm. And Lorcan steps aside so Fenris and him can start sword fighting. And Elide is just sobbing and screaming and trying to get away from Gabrielle to protect Lorcan. And Rowan stops them. Rowan walks over and he stops them. And Lorcan glances over to Elide. Her arm is all patched up and he knows that it must have used up the remainder of Gabrielle's magic. And he's very appreciative of that. And Rowan says, this ends now. You two don't touch them. They're under the protection of Aelin Galathinius. If you harm them, it will be considered an act of war. So essentially what this does is because it puts a significant damper on things, it allows the blood oath not to be as effective. I don't know. It just stops the blood oath from working for now, but it won't stop it forever. Then Lorcan rushes over to Elide's side, and Aelin and Adian come over to see what the hell is happening. They're we just exploded all these Ilken, and now there's two screaming weirdos over here on the swamp. And Aelin blinked, her face golden and crumpled as she said, are you Elide? Aelin slid to her knees, not a foot away, and it occurred to Elide that she should be the one bowing, head to the dirt. You look so much like your mother, Aelin said, her voice cracking. Adian silently knelt, putting a broad hand on Aelin's shoulder. And I am crying. Again, this is a separate cry. These are two separate cries, okay? First we cried because Elide offered Lorcan a home, and now we are crying because finally Aelin can pass along this message. Aelin apologizes to Elide, and Elide reaches out to touch her to make sure she's real. She spent a decade just hoping for Aelin, and she's finally in the physical presence of her. She knows that her mother gave her last breaths to make sure this woman would be alive, and here she is, and she's this force. She's going to save their people. And at last Aelin said to Elide, she bought me time. Elide knew who the queen meant. Guys, how am I ever gonna do Kingdom of Ash? Elide knew who the queen meant. Aelin's hand began shaking. The queen's voice broke entirely as she said, I am alive today because of your mother. Elide only whispered, I know. She told me to tell you, a shuddering inhale, but Aelin didn't break her stare, even as tears continued cutting through the dirt on her cheeks. Your mother told me to tell you that she loves you very, very much. Those were her last words to me. Tell my Elide, I love her very much. And then Manon shows up, and Elide starts sobbing again, because Elide thought Manon was dead, and Manon just mouths the word hope at Elide. Stop. I can't handle this, actually. This is too upsetting. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to leave the town. Maybe the country. Maybe the planet. Aelin is inspecting Elide's arms and glares at Fenris and warns the Fae boys again, if they touch Elide or Lorcan, they will both die. She's like, hey, Fenris and Gabrielle, look at me in my eyeballs. You touch them, toast your real. And then Elide sees the sword of Orianth, and she'd been told by her uncle that it had been melted down, but it's here. This symbol of Terrasen. And Adian's turquoise eye softened. It survived. We survived, the three of them, the remnants of their courts, their families. And Aelin starts glaring over at Lorcan, but then Elide says, I survived, Majesty, because of him. She pointed with her chin to Manon, and because of her. I am here because of both of them. I am here, Elide said, as Aelin fixed those unnerving, vivid eyes on her, because of Caltaine Rompierre. Her throat clogged, but she pushed past it as her trembling fingers fished out the little bit of cloth from her inside pocket. The other-worldly feel of it pulsed in her palm. She said to give this to you. To Selena Sarthothian, I mean. She didn't know you were the same. She said it was a payment for a warm cloak offered in a cold dungeon. She wasn't ashamed of the tears that fell. Not in honor of what that woman had done. Aelin studied the scrap of cloth in Elide's shaking palm. I think she kept this as a reminder of kindness, Elide said hoarsely. They broke her and hurt her. She died alone in Morianth. She died alone, so they couldn't, none of them spoke or moved. She couldn't tell if it made it worse. if the hand that Lorcan laid on her back made her cry harder. The words tumbled out of Elide's shaking mouth. She said to remember your promise to punish them all, and said that you can unlock any door if only you have the key. And Dorian pops up from nowhere and is like, Caltaine? And Manon says, Lady Elide Lorcan of Pierreth, meet Dorian Havillard, King of Ardelane. And Elide's like, hello, Majesty. Like, so many royals. Elide is like, oh my gosh, I gotta be bowing to everyone. And she's just sitting on the ground, vibing. And Aelin is like, hey, do you know what that is? That thing you just gave me? And Elide says, yes, Majesty. And Aelin is like, to Lorcan. She says, why didn't you take it? And Lorcan says, it wasn't mine to take. And Elide says to Lorcan, thank you for bringing her to me. And then turns to Manon. I lay claim to her. Which blood in her veins or no, she is Lady of Pierreth, she is mine. And Manon says, and what if I claim her for the Blackbeaks? And Aelin says, Blackbeaks are the Crescents. And Elide blink. Manon and the Crescents? What was the wing leader doing here anyway? Where was Abraxas? What a great question. Why isn't Abraxas here? Elide's asking the real questions, the things we should be asking. And the witch said, careful, Majesty, with your power reduced to embers, you'll have to fight me the old-fashioned way again. And Aelin says, you know I've been hoping for a round or two. And Rowan is like, stop. And I said, they're just bickering and having a good little time. Leave them alone. And Manon tips the word key into Aelin's hand from Elide's. She, like, passes it, helps her pass it, because Aelin hasn't taken it yet. Get this out of Elide's hand. And then tries to pull her to her feet, but Lorcan gets grumbly. And Manon says, your claim on her mail is at the very bottom of this list. Iron teeth slid out, turning that beautiful face petrifying. Lorcan didn't let go. Manon crooned in a way that usually meant death. Don't touch her. She's like, back off. You don't give me orders, witch, Lorcan said, and you have no say in what is between us. Elide frowned at him. You're making it worse. We like to call it territorial male nonsense, Aelin confided, or territorial fey bastard works just as nicely. Aelin winked at Lorcan. You hurt her and I'll melt your bones, she merely said as she walked away. Aedion looked over at Lorcan and said, Aelin does whatever she wants, but I think she'd let me see how many of your bones I can break before she melts them, if you hurt Elide. Everyone's like, Elide is actually all of our little baby precious angel girly, so nobody hurts her. You will have to deal with literally everyone. And she watches as they walk away, and Rowan gives her a look that is an invitation to join them. So Elide headed for them, her court, and she did not look back. And that's the end of the whole series. Goodbye. That's the end. There's end of the book. Everyone has a really nice time. There's actually like a cute little epilogue where they pick Caleb up from the airport. He had a great time on the southern continent. That's it. And everyone lives happily ever after. I like this moment because I do feel like it's just like we get like one glimmer of joy. Rowan has mostly been just observing Lorcan, but he's like really surprised with his behavior around Elide because obviously Lorcan is acting quite differently around his new little angel bestie. And Rowan says to Lorcan, how did you find us? And Lorcan says, the dark god nudged me towards here. The Ilken army did the rest. And Rowan's thinking about the pull Aelin had over him. The compulsion to go to her once the Ilken were dead. And Lorcan is like, that power could destroy. Talking about Aelin. And Rowan says, I know. When the Ilken's resistance had finally yielded beneath flame and ice and wind, Rowan hadn't been able to stifle the yearning to walk into the burning heart of that power and see her glowing with it. Halfway across the plain, he'd realized that it wasn't just the allure of that tugged at him. It was the woman inside it, who might need physical contact with another living being to remind herself that she had a body and people who loved her, and to pull her back from that killing calm that so mercilessly wiped the Ilken from the skies. But then the flames had vanished, their enemies raining down as ash and ice and corpses, and she'd looked at him. Holy gods, when she'd looked at him, he'd almost fallen to his knees. Queen and lover and friend and more. He hadn't cared that they had an audience. He had needed to touch her, to reassure himself that she was all right, to feel the woman who could do such great and terrible things and still look at him with that beckoning, vibrant life in her eyes. You make me want to live, Rowan. He wondered if Elide Lorcan had somehow made Lorcan want to do the same. That's where we're going to end this because I've been filming for like a little over 2 hours. We're going to end this part here and then we'll jump into part 2 where more bad things happen and everyone has a bad time again. Do I cry again? Yeah. As I reminded you at the beginning of this, I just finished the part 2 slides and I did sob through many of them. Like, could not breathe, my dogs were worried types of crying. Anyway, that's what we have to look forward to now. See you then! Bye!